Hi everyone, this is What If Fan, bringing today a new fanfic. This is What If Transmigrated to Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. This fanfic will be getting a new part every third day, just like all the other continuing fanfics as mentioned in the previous video. Please find the fanfic name and author name in the description. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe and check out the other content on the channel. Let's start Chapter 1. With a yawn, he blinked open his eyes blearily and made to sit up, only to yelp in pain as his forehead struck something hard, an audible thud resounding out loud, and a ringing pain tearing through his skull. "Fuck!" he cursed, rolling to the side, yelping gain when he fell off balance and struck the floor. He groaned in pain. "Goddamn man," he hissed quietly, massaging his head. "That's gonna leave a bruise," he bemoaned, eyes clenched shut. It took a few moments of rubbing at the new sore spot on his head before the pain lessened enough for him to open his eyes without complaint. He blinked groggily, taking in the room around him, his eyes swiveling around the room idly. A moment later they shot wide open and he bounced up on his feet. "What the hell?" He panicked, head rapidly turning from side to side as he looked around him. The small room with warm brown painted walls and a soft pink carpet. The triple bunk bed was completely immaculate except for the bottom bunk, the one he'd just rolled out of. The desk with an older model computer screen and processor on it to his left. The closet in the front corner of the room, and right next to it, between it and the front door, is a sink and cooker combo thing. He didn't even know something like that existed. It looked almost alien. Then there were the completely foreign posters up on the walls, all except one that looked like the Duel Monsters card Vampire Genesis. He remembered it well, having bought the Vampire and Red Eyes Darkness Dragon starter decks when they came out from Toys R Us years ago. He snorted as his eyes landed on the final item of the room, laying completely inconspicuous in the middle of the room. A dual disc, one of the rounded versions he'd never really gotten into, preferring the dark blue evil version from the original series. He looked around him suspiciously. Where the hell am I? He wondered, especially since this room felt really familiar to him, as if he'd spent a lot of time here before. Curiosity getting the better of him, he walked over and picked up the dual disc, sliding open the slot to check out the deck within. It'd been ages since he'd played with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. To his disappointment, it was empty. Although he was rather surprised at how high-tech the thing was, it felt actually real in comparison to the crappy plastic versions he'd used before. He slid it up his arm, and his eyes widened again, as it beeped and automatically clipped onto his wrist and fastened itself. "Whoa!" he exclaimed. It let loose a few beeps before the blue screen in the middle lit up with a name. Yardan Odhar. He blinked. The first name was just another variation of his actual first name, and the family name was Gaelic. He was rusty as hell with the language, but he recognized the word Odhar anywhere. His family name literally meant son of Odhar. When fully translated and taken a step further, his name altogether meant something along the lines of the descending, conquering son of the Dark One. Freaky. He swallowed heavily. A suspicion began to form. But no, it couldn't be. That was just too insane to think about. It couldn't actually happen, could it? He ran a hand through his hair, noting through his messy fringe that it was still the same, the dark brown with blonde highlights running through it. He looked himself over for the first time and panicked a bit again when he realized that one, he was wearing different clothes than he fell asleep in. A pair of black sweatpants and a white hooded tank top. He'd gone to bed last night in just a pair of boxers. And two, his body felt different, bigger but smaller at the same time. Storming over to the closet, he wrenched it open and muffled a shout of hysteria. He looked completely different. His eyes were brown now, not the bright blue they were before. His jaw was more pointed, his nose is smaller, and most of all, he was a few inches taller than he remembered, yet at the same time slimmer in the shoulders. He remembered being a lot stockier than he was now. He wasn't thin, actually maybe decently fit, but he'd started working out and hitting up the gym when he was 12. The boy looking back at him lacked the broadness of his own shoulders and thrust of his chest. The most incriminating thing of all, though, was the bright red jacket hanging beside his mirror alongside a bunch of other clothing. He staggered back, idly noting his hands were shaking as he balanced himself against the bed behind him. Oh God, no, he despaired. Everything was becoming more clear. Things were coming back to him. He knew this room, or at the very least had seen very similar rooms, both in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime and the Tag Force games. He swiftly rounded on his feet and launched a right fist at the wall as hard as he could, muffling a cry of pain as his knuckles embedded into the plaster of the wall, leaving a small dent. The pain helped him clear his head. He breathed deeply, closing his eyes. He had to think. This was either the most real dream he'd ever had, which shouldn't be possible since, for the most part, when you knew a dream was a dream, you woke up, or this was real. And all the things it entailed were real as well. The Shadow Riders, the Sacred Beasts, the Society of Light, fucking Ubel. And here he was without a fucking deck, and he had nowhere to go. Think dumbass, he snarled to himself. He pushed back any worry for why he ended up here, or his family back home. They didn't matter right now. Only making sure he survived did. There was another currency for duelists in Yu-Gi-Oh!, wasn't there? Especially in Duel Academy. He patted himself down and almost cried in relief when he felt a familiar weight in his pocket, almost like a mobile phone. The PDA he remembered, it was called vaguely. He swiped it on, quickly finding the profile tab, and almost roared in frustration when he saw what looked back at him. Name, Yardan Odhar, year, first year dorm, Slifer Red Day, 02 DP. 0. He could have cried like a little girl then and there. He had no deck and no duelist points to buy card booster packs with to make a deck. He had no deck to win points in reverse. But no, he could work with this still. It said it was day 2. Hopefully he was in Zayn's year or something. Give him time to prepare. And if Tag Force was anything to go by, there were cards left all over the place at Duel Academy, especially by rich assholes like Chaz, who threw away any card they deemed weak, without even attempting to understand how they could be used. Yardan, like it or not, that was who he was now, had no such problems. For one, he really needed the cards. For two, he'd had to make do with really weak cards in the beginning of each Yu-Gi-Oh! Game he played. He knew quite a lot about them and how to use them. He was never so thankful for those in-game chain tutorials than he was now. Wait! Weak cards, he hissed in realization, an idea springing to mind. The Reject Well. That place with all the dual spirits and abandoned cards Chaz went to when he needed to make a deck to face his older brother. How do I find it? Yardan racked his brain trying to remember the episode he watched years ago in detail. It took him a few moments, but he pieced it together, and remember, it was Banner that told Chaz all about the cards. He nearly pumped his fist in victory. He hurriedly kicked off his clothes, taking a moment to compare his size down below, and sighing in relief for a moment when he estimated them about the same length and girth. Then he pulled on a pair of dark gray jeans, a short-sleeved black top, and threw on the red blazer over the top of it, leaving the jacket open simply because it looked so much better, and then pulling on those funky red boots that went with the jacket. He admired himself in the mirror for a moment and smirked. Not bad, mate, he whistled with a laugh. He had to keep upbeat after all. He checked the time on his PDA, noting it was 7:24 a.m. before slipping it into his pocket and heading out the door. As he closed the door behind him, Yardan let the salty ocean air breeze over him and shivered in delight when the warm sun basked down upon him. Good shit, he commented to himself, looking around the landing he was standing in and noticing that just like the Tag Force protagonist, he got the end room. Awesome. He made his way down the stairs and made his way over to the second door on the bottom. Thankfully, he remembered the room Banner stayed in, thanks to remembering that Gravekeeper's duo of episodes. He rapped on the wooden door twice, and then waited. A few moments later, he heard the sound of movement inside before the door swung open. He had to fight the urge to shout happily when the long-haired man in the white shirt, clutching his tubby cut to his chest with one arm, came into view. He thought Banner was awesome in the show. He wished he had a teacher like him in school, so damn chill. Ah, Mr. Odhar, how can I help you? Banner peered at him over his small spectacles, a warm smile on his face. Sweet, no problems on that front. It looked like he indeed was a student at Duel Academy. How bitsin' was that? Oh, right. How best to go about this? He should have thought this through more. Oh well, best to wing it then. Yo, sir, Yardan greeted with a wave. I need your help. He came out bluntly. Banner blinked. Maybe it was hard to tell when his eyes were kept so narrowed. How so, my young student? He asked. What appears to be the problem? The alchemy teacher questioned. He decided to just continue being blunt. He wasn't one for beating around the bush. My deck is missing, he replied promptly. Banner staggered slightly, and Pharaoh even let out a slight hiss. It has been stolen? He asked, now peering at him intently. Yardan shrugged his shoulders. Don't know, he replied. I left my cards in my duel disc last night, and when I woke up, they were gone. He'd given another quick look over the room just to make sure and hadn't found anything. Not even in the deck container strapped to the back of his jeans. This is most troubling, Banner sighed deeply. And you just arrived yesterday and have no points, so buying new cards is not an option, yes? Yardan simply nodded. Banner sighed again. I shall contact Principal Shepherd and see if he won't give you an advancement on points for the moment to pay back later, he said. Tempting, oh so tempting. Even a mishmash deck of booster pack cards would be better than the deck he'd make from the Reject Well, but a plan had come to mind almost as soon as he thought of the Reject Well cards. Dual spirits. Jaden had proven it was possible to bond with them in regards to Ubel and Honest. Their powers stacked on top of his abilities as the Supreme King had made him individually far more powerful than even Yugi and Adam. What if he could bond with dual spirits as well? He'd get awesome powers. It made him salivate a bit just to think of it. Besides, he was always up for a challenge. Sure, he'd love a Red Eyes deck, but there'd be no challenge stomping everyone down with one of those. It's fine, Professor. That's not why I bothered you. Yardan cut in. It's that, last night, a few older students told me about a place called the Reject Well, a place where people ditch their unwanted cards. I figured I'd just go there and grab them all. Banner raised an eyebrow above his glasses at him. You do realize, of course, that those cards are all very weak and considered in general to be useless, he asked pointedly. Yardan had the funny feeling that he was being tested, but he already had an answer pre-prepared, and a true one to him at that, born from his experience in the Yu-Gi-Oh games. There's no such thing as a useless card, he retorted cleanly. I know from experience, even the oddest and weakest of seeming cards can have their uses. A large smile then spread across the black-haired alchemist's lean face. An excellent answer, young student, he replied, reaching over with his free hand to pat him gently on the shoulder. Come in, my young friend. I shall draw you up a map. But I must warn you, Yardan had to admit that it was a bit of a trek to get to the well. It made him idly wonder why so many people made the effort to get out there just to dump their cards. Whoa, he murmured, looking up into the sky above him. Circling around the trees was a gang of incorporeal-looking spirits. Freaky. If he didn't know this forest was pretty much harmless for the most part, and that these spirits were really weak, he would be freaking out right about now. The mere fact that he could see the dual spirits, though, was just way too cool to describe. It overshadowed any doubts within him, and just got him too excited to be scared at all. One of the spirits broke off from the others, swinging down at him with an attempt at a ghastly cry. Begone! It attempted to cry out threateningly, phasing through his stomach. A small shudder went through his body, but it failed to cause anything worse to happen. Especially with its squeaky voice. He recognized the card spirit. As it swung around him and made to fly back up and join its companions, he called out to it, Wait! The spirit paused, turning to look at him, and he pounced on the opening. You're Petite Dragon, right? He asked. The whitewashed form and ghostly look it had made it harder to recognize, but he knew that card anywhere. Petite Dragon was one of the first cards he ever got, a gift from a friend whom had gotten a bunch of cards for his birthday just when they first came out. His friend had passed 10 of them on to him to start with. All of them are little dragons besides one. That was where his preference for the dragon-type cards came from, besides their cool designs. They were the first cards he ever got. Even still had them in his original body to this very day. The translucent spirit peered at him for a moment, before with a pop it took on corporeal form. A small serpentine green dragon with tiny little wings atop its back. Why are you here, human? It asked gruffly. Well, attempted to at least. Its cute looks completely ruined the attempt. Yardan resisted the urge to literally shout in excitement. It was so damn awesome. A real honest-to-God duel spirit. He fought himself as hard as he could to keep his composure. I'm looking for a well that other students have taken to dumping their unwanted cards in, he replied. A small growl escaped the small dragon spirit. Are you another human looking to get rid of useless cards like us, then? It asked. Hell no. He blurted out before he could stop himself. When the dragon peered at him curiously, he rushed to explain himself. Look, you might not have the outright benefit of newer, more powerful cards, but that doesn't make you useless, he said vehemently. And he meant it. There were quite a few combos one could use even a weak vanilla monster like Petite Dragon for. The dragon drifted closer to him, floating around his side and coming to a rest on his shoulders. It was almost like Pikachu with Ash. He had to resist the urge to crow out in glee. Oh, it hummed curiously. His hand twitched. He withheld the urge to pet the small, surprisingly warm-feeling spirit on his shoulder. You can be used to fuse Darkfire Dragon, and while it only has an attack of 1500, it's below level 6 as well, so it can be equipped with fusion weapon bringing its attack points up to 3000, he told the little dragon. That was actually a combo he'd used before. And even without that, you can be set in defense mode too, and let Dragon's Gunfire be used, and in the graveyard as a dragon you power up cards like Red Eye's Darkness Dragon. Huh. Petite Dragon made an odd sound, like a cross between a squeak and a cough. You seem to have put a lot of thought into this, he said. Its voice was fairly masculine despite being squeaky, so Yardan was of the opinion it was a male at this point. He shook his head. Not really, he replied. It's just a combo I've used before in a few games. The small green dragon floated up off of his shoulder and came to a rest in front of his face, staring straight into his eyes. If you are not here to toss cards, then why are you here? He asked. My deck was stolen, Yardan replied bluntly, keeping to his story. I headed out here so I can grab the cards in the well and make a deck. Petite Dragon was silent again for a moment. And what about when you get stronger cards? He asked. Are you just going to abandon us again? The dragon questioned, voice level. No freaking way. Regardless of any potential, he'd never thrown away a single Yu-Gi-Oh card. He had thousands of them in his old body packed away that he added to when a new card came out that he took a liking to. The latest of the batch had been Void Ogre Dragon. He'd loved the looks of that card, and despite being hard to summon, it was a complete and utter beast, especially equipped with Follow Wing. Nope, he made sure to reply. For one, you guys are dual spirits. That's worth way more than some measly attack points. And secondly, if you guys don't fit in the deck with newer cards, I'll just make multiple decks to fit you all. It was that simple, and it was something he liked to do when he used his cards previously. It threw off his friends back when they were hyped on the anime and played and collected cards constantly. Yardan reached an arm out towards Petite Dragon. So what you say? He asked. Want to come with me? There was a moment of silence before a small smile spread across the dragon spirit's face. Very well, he said in return. I have no reason to refuse and do admit that I feel quite excited at the thought of participating in a duel again. There was a shimmer of green light around the dragon as he closed his eyes, and then the shimmer of green spread to his palm, before splitting apart a second later to reveal a card sitting upon his hand. Petite Dragon, level 2 Wind Dragon, 600-700, awesome, just completely awesome. It seemed like the dual spirits could keep their cards with them at all times, or materialize cards of them. Both were pretty awesome, though there were some insane benefits to the second one if true. He'd need to check that out later. Yardan nodded up towards the spirits still floating about above them. 3 of them, if he counted right. What about your friends? He asked the green dragon in front of him. Think they'll want to come as well? I hope so. Petite Dragon replied. I'd be quite lonely if my friends didn't want to come along. With that said, he floated up into the air, the other 3 incorporeal spirits stopping their spirited flights around the air and turning their attention to the small green dragon. He could hear them chatter for a few moments as Petite Dragon attempted to convince them. But a minute or two later, all 4 of them swooped down in front of him. There was a myriad of flashing colors in front of him, forcing him to shield his eyes for a second until they died down. When he pulled his hand away from his eyes, his jaw almost dropped in shock. 3 other small dragons were floating in front of him. Though one of them couldn't really be called small, it was half his size with broad chest muscle and orange scales. Alongside it was another small serpentine green dragon, the same as Petite Dragon, only with darker green scales, whereas Petites were a lime green. And finally, a tiny little turquoise dragon, little bigger than his finger. He knew all 3 of these dragons. "So you're gonna use us in duels, huh? That's so cool!" The buff little orange baby dragon crowed in excitement, punching 2 closed fists into the air one after another in a set of rapid punches. The Petite Dragon look-alike floated elegantly around him. "A pleasure to meet you, friend of Petite Dragon," Fairy Dragon intoned softly with an airy, gentle female voice. They were friends already? That was quick. Not that he minded. Hello! The tiny little dragon, Decoy Dragon, waved shyly, halfway hiding behind Petite Dragon. Yardan couldn't help the grin that overcame his face. "Hey guys," he greeted them excitedly. "It's great to meet you. So you want to tag along?" he asked, holding his hand out to them. "Heck yeah!" Baby Dragon shouted energetically. An orange light enshrouded its form just like Petite Dragon before it, and in his hand appeared its card form. Baby Dragon, level 4 Wind Dragon, 1200-700. The other 2 kept silent. Yardan thought it was mostly that Fairy Dragon didn't speak much, and that Decoy Dragon seemed very shy. But like the other 2 before them, they glowed with bright lights before 2 cards appeared in his hand. Fairy Dragon, level 4 Wind Dragon, 1100-1200. Decoy Dragon, level 2 Fire Dragon Effect, 300-200. Then one by one they disappeared into the cards in his hand, all except Petite Dragon, who hung around, curling around his shoulders and resting atop them like a snake on a perch. "Awesome!" Yardan shouted himself in excitement. Fairy Dragon can be used to make Kaiser Dragon. Baby Dragon can make both Alligator Sword Dragon and Thousand Dragon, and Decoy Dragon is another thing entirely. Who would get rid of a card like Decoy Dragon? It's so amazing when it comes to special summoning powerful dragons from the grave. Decoy's previous owner could not appreciate his effect. Petite Dragon replied from his reclined position. A power duelist was only interested in high attack power. Yardan almost sighed. He did shake his head, though. Absolutely shameful, and it was true. This world revolved around dueling, and the best of the best was known for using weak cards like Wadapon and Marshmallow. So why did people ridicule weaker monsters when the best of the best used them? Such arrogance. He bet it was mostly rich, arrogant Obelisk blues that got rid of the cards here. Well, his loss then. Yardan concluded. He turned his head slightly to peer at Petite Dragon. "So, can you lead on to the well? I've not got much time before I need to get to class." It had taken him a good 20 minutes to get this far, and he'd spent a good 10 minutes getting the 4 dragons he had now to join him. Classes started at 9, so he had to get a move on. "Very well, let's get going then," Petite Dragon replied. It took another 5 minutes of walking before he reached the well. Just like he saw Chaz do, he swung the rope ladders attached to the top of the well down and descended into the hole in the ground. The sunlight from the hole shone down with enough light to illuminate the cavern he landed in at the bottom, and he looked around himself in awe, looking at all the scattered cards. There had to be hundreds of them. Good thing Banner had given him the rucksack he held over his shoulder to store the excess cards in. One thing he noted, though, was that there were no spirits floating around like the other 4 were outside. "Where's all the spirits?" he asked the small dragon on his shoulder. "Most cards here prefer to sleep within their cards rather than live the dreary existence of an abandoned cave dweller," the dragon explained to him. Cocking its head up, Petite Dragon called out loudly, "Awaken spirits! A duelist has come to liberate you from this lonely existence." His squeaky voice echoed around the well. Almost immediately voices started shouting back. Some in disbelief, some in excitement, but they all came. One by one, he saw different colored shapes and bodies shoot out from the cards. In moments, he was surrounded. Dozens upon dozens of spirits surrounded them. Yardan could not keep the awe from showing on his face as he looked around them. "Lesser Dragon, Oh wow, Soul Tiger. Then there was Spirit of the Breeze. She was pretty cute. Most of the smaller spirits crowded around him. Meanwhile, some larger spirits took residence behind the others. Two dragons stood out as the biggest, identical in body shape, size, and even face, the only difference between them being their colors. One blue and one red, the winged dragons, guardian of the fortress, numbers 1 and 2. Perfect. Number 1 was the other half used with Fairy Dragon to make Kaiser Dragon. It could work as a decent beat stick. A number of voices chattered at him from all around him. He could barely make a word out edgewise, though, because they were all talking over each other, shouting at him, towards him, pleading even in some cases. Just when his temper began to simmer when they wouldn't calm down, a silky voice cut through the cavern. It wasn't very loud, but somehow it thundered above all the other voices and quieted them down. Quiet was all the silky voice demanded, and they all complied. Yardan's head rotated towards where the voice came from, and his eyes widened in shock as he noted a large serpent purple dragon reclining lazily atop a rocky perch above him and all the other spirits. "Serpent Knight Dragon," he whispered in shock. Excitement above all else he'd felt so far flowed through him, his body shaking with it. "He is the strongest spirit here," Petite Dragon whispered in his ear. "He was abandoned here over a year ago by a duelist that had trouble summoning him." Yardan could understand that. Serpent Knight Dragon was lackluster compared to Trihorn Dragon, whom was quite a bit stronger, less rare, and could be summoned for the exact same as Serpent Knight Dragon. There was a bit of a saying that went around about the card when he was in his original body. Serpent Knight Dragon is worth nothing. The only reason people tried to get a hold of it nowadays was because of the nice card art. But to Yardan, Serpent Knight Dragon had a special place in his heart. Red Eyes was his favorite monster, but Serpent Knight Dragon was the first ever card he had ever gotten. He'd found quite a few ways to play it over the years, just due to sheer nostalgic fondness of the card. "So human," Serpent Knight Dragon's voice cut across to him. "Just why are you here?" The silky voiced dragon asked of him. "I've come to take any of you who agree with me to build a deck with," he replied promptly. "Best to not beat around the bush." As far as mythology was concerned, dragons were not fond of meekness, for the most part. There was a chitter of excitement from the spirits around him, but they dared not speak up too loudly while Serpent Knight Dragon was holding court, as it were. "Oh," the Serpentine Dragon mused in interest. "And why would you want to make a deck with us?" "As you can see, I am by far the strongest monster here, and according to my old duelist, I am quite unwieldy and not at all worth playing," he continued to comment, because there was no doubt that silky voice was male to his ears. "Then he was a fool," Yardan replied promptly again. He heard a series of gasps ring out around him from the spirits, but he pushed on. "It's true that compared to other dragons that require 2 tributes, your attack power is rather low, and you have no effect to compensate for that, but it's still easy to play around that kind of weakness easily. Plus, it was still the GX era. Serpent Knight Dragon wasn't too shabby when you got it out onto the field." "Oh?" The dragon hummed, seemingly indifferently. "And how would you work around that?" the dragon asked. But once again, he felt like he was being tested. Yardan looked around the floor for a moment. He could explain easily enough, but without a card to help, they may have trouble understanding, especially when he had no access to the card he was talking about. His eyes trailed across the cards, searching through them. Call of the Haunted, not bad, an old version of Polymerization, Ukazi, Dust Tornado, Ultimate Offering, Rainbow Life. There! A combo came to mind with a few of the cards he just saw, but this one was much simpler. He walked over to the card he saw and picked it up, holding it in the air towards Serpent Knight Dragon. "Do you know what this is?" he asked the dragon spirit. "I do not," the dragon replied simply. "This is the Foolish Burial spell card. It lets you take 1 card from your deck and put it into your graveyard," he explained. He then went through the 4 dragon cards he'd gained earlier and held up the card for the small, shy dragon he'd taken in. "With it, I'd send you to the graveyard and then summon Decoy Dragon here. He may be small, but when he's attacked, his effect lets you summon a level 7 or higher dragon-type monster from your graveyard and change the target of the attack to it. Before the large serpentine dragon could hope to respond, he walked around picking up 3 specific trap cards he saw before grabbing Foolish Burial. With these 3 alone, if you were in my hand, I could use Rainbow Life to discard you to the graveyard, or any other monster in my hand. Then activate Ultimate Offering, allowing me to pay 500 life points to normal summon any monster that can be in my hand. But with Rainbow Life, I'd gain 500 life points instead, get to summon a monster, and then on my opponent's turn or my next turn, I'd use Call of the Haunted to summon the monster I discarded to the field from the graveyard. He rattled off the combo he just thought of after seeing the 3 cards. There was complete silence for a few moments. Then a silky chuckle broke it. "Interesting! Most interesting!" Serpent Knight Dragon exclaimed. It almost sounded delighted to Yardan's ears. Floating up off of his perch, the dark dragon floated elegantly down to meet him face to face, and he had to withhold a gulp when he realized just how big the dragon's spirit was. It reminded him of a wider, more elegant and beautiful anaconda. "What is your name, duelist?" the spirit asked him. He refused to show fear. Earning the allegiance of Serpent Knight Dragon would surely speed things along for him. It was strong, not the strongest out there, not even close, but it was decently powerful. And he had a plan. Jaden had shown it was possible to bond with spirits and gain power through those bonds, both with Ubel and Honest. He had no power at all besides being able to see the spirits. Heck, his body was weaker than his original one despite being taller. But he had a plan. Before he could get to quality, he would settle with quantity, bonding with all the dual spirits and powering up through each one. If he got enough of them, surely he'd gain enough power to survive the events to come. It didn't even matter how far he ran either, really. If Jaden failed to stop Night Shroud or Darkness or whatever the hell he called himself, everyone was fucked either way. And before even that, there was the sacred beasts that could cause untold calamities if Kagamaru wasn't stopped. He needed to stay here and grow powerful and make sure Duel Academy never fell if he wanted to survive. "It's Yardan Odhar," he responded quickly. The regal dragon inclined his head. "Very well, Yardan, hold out your hand, and I shall call you master from henceforth," he stated aloud. Keeping his hand from shaking with the excitement still coursing through him, Yardan watched in awe as shadows pooled together around the serpentine dragon before he disappeared along with them, and in his hand appeared the beautiful drawn card. Serpent Knight Dragon, Level 7 Dark Dragon, 2350/2400. That was when the dam broke and the other monsters swamped him from all sides. Light blinded him briefly as multiple spirits jumped the gun and just turned into cards appearing in his hand, other cards on the floor levitating up into his palm, and one by one the spirits disappeared from the deep well cavern as a large stack of cards continued to pile upon his palm. "Ooh," Yardan swiped the sweat building on his forehead. "What a riot," he laughed. They sure were an excitable bunch. Spirit of the Breeze even gave him a lingering peck on the cheek before she turned into card form. "I must say, well done, Yardan," Petite Dragon congratulated him. "When you convinced me earlier, when you were talking about the possibilities of using me in a duel, I had no idea you could come up with such comprehensive card combinations just from seeing multiple cards in one place." Making his way around the cavern, Yardan started lifting up the spell and trap cards that had no spirits to automatically levitate or appear in his palm. "I've played with loads of different cards in loads of different duels," he explained. And he had, only in his old world against friends and in the Tag Force games, not exactly real duels. A lot of the combos I think of just come from experience using the cards I've had before. "Well, I do say, you appear much better prepared than my previous owner," the small dragon commented. "Now what are your plans from here on out now that you have obtained enough cards to make a deck?" he questioned. "First, I'll make a rough deck on the way to class. I'll probably have a duel today," he responded. "Second, I wanted to ask you something," he continued on. Time to plant the seeds for his growth. "Oh," Petite Dragon hummed. "I've heard interesting rumors about dual spirits," Yardan carried on seamlessly, "that they can bond to a duelist and make them more powerful." Petite Dragon nodded his head. "It is indeed true," he replied casually. There was no implication of anything in his voice, so Yardan counted that as a win. Is it possible for me to bond with you guys? Yardan continued on to ask. Before Petite Dragon could say anything, there was a shimmer of dark, shadowy light to his left, and the gracefully large form of Serpent Knight Dragon appeared beside him. Yardan almost jumped in fright at the sudden appearance. Not possible with me at the moment, my master, the graceful dragon commented casually, as if he'd been there all along. The power of your soul is not yet powerful enough to sustain a bond with me, and even most of the monsters that come from this cave. Yardan skid in disappointment. So no chance, then? He asked. The serpentine dragon shook his head. Not at all, master. I merely mean that you must grow stronger in the soul if you wish to bond with those such as myself. He inclined his head towards the smaller green serpentine dragon on Yardan's shoulder. Start with the little dragon. Bonding with him will allow your soul to grow slightly more powerful. Then when you are used to the strain of the bond, continue with the other monsters, such as that decoy dragon you showed me earlier. Build up your strength from the bottom until you gain enough strength to support a bond with myself and other powerful monsters. And with that said, the dragon disappeared back into his card as casually as he appeared. Useful to know. Yardan commented before turning his attention to the dragon on his shoulder. So you up for it, buddy? He asked. Petite Dragon pursed his draconian snout for a moment before closing his eyes and nodding in agreement. Very well, I see no problem with bonding to you, the small dragon said. Floating up into the air, before Yardan could react, the small dragon rested his head against his forehead, and then there was a bright flash of lime green that caused him to flinch back slightly. Gah! A sudden feeling of lightness swept through his body, and he almost fell before he caught himself, and it passed. When he opened his eyes from when he reflexively closed them to shield them from the flash, he noted that Petite Dragon was gone. Eh? He grunted in confusion. Petite Dragon, where'd you go? He asked, looking around himself and finding no sign of the little dragon. Relax, Yardan. The familiar voice of Petite Dragon resounded throughout his mind, causing him to whirl around again looking for the Duel spirit. I have taken up residence in your soul. But until you adapt to the bond and grow more powerful, you won't have the power to manifest me outside your body. The Duel spirit explained to him. Yardan frowned thoughtfully, throwing a quick few jabs in front of him and then jumping in place for a bit, testing his body out. I don't really feel any different, he commented, disappointment appearing in his voice. I'm a very weak spirit, remember? As a dragon, I cannot even breathe fire yet, Petite Dragon responded. There won't be much benefit to a bond with me, as I am now, besides allowing your soul to grow a little bit more powerful and maybe slight instincts of the draconian nature. I doubt it will be much, though. I'm not much of a dragon right now. Oh, well, that was cool at least. Indeed, the spirit within his soul agreed. Even more cool, they could communicate without him speaking aloud. This was definitely the start to something epic. Extra chapter. Yardan Deck 1 Monsters Serpent Knight Dragon Guardian of the Fortress 1 Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress 2 Lesser Dragon Fairy Dragon Soul Tigered Man Baby Dragon Petite Dragon Castle Gate Royal Magical Library Grey Wing King of the Swamp Spirit of the Breeze Decoy Dragon Copycat Chaos Necromancer Relinquished Spells Double Summon Despellish Burial Giant Trunade 1000 Energy Triangle Power Shield and Sword X3 Soul Charge Ukazi Dragon's Gunfire Polymerization Black Illusion Ritual Diffusion Graceful Dice Dragon Treasure Optic Camouflage Armor Fusion Mountain Traps Dust Tornado Magic and Arm Shield Tyrant Wing Soul Rope Ring of Destruction Rainbow Life Disgraceful Dice Ultimate Offering Call of the Haunted Trap Jammer Magic Jammer Extra Deck Kaiser Dragon Thousand Dragon Darkfire Dragon Alligator Sword Dragon Chapter Tube Time. Yardan had made the trek to the Reject Well and then made his way all the way back from the deeper parts of the forest and made it to his classroom. It was already 9:37. First period had already begun at exactly 9. He was more than a half an hour late to his first class. Not exactly a great way to make a first impression. As soon as he opened the sliding automatic door and stepped within the classroom, everything went entirely quiet, and all eyes were on him. He could have been there a good 20 minutes earlier if he didn't ask a few of his new friends to find any cards laying about the area and bring them to him. But, in his defense, as far as Tag Force went, there was a ton of useful cards just laying around. Hell, he remembered picking up an amphibian beast once, and that was a level 6, 1 tribute summon, 2400 attack point beat stick that would be amazing for where he found himself. Sadly, he wasn't that lucky, but Mask of the Accursed and Burst Breath were 2 rather great cards when used properly, and well worth being a bit extra late when he was already late to begin with. Ah, Mr. Odhar, so good of your lazy self to finally roll out of bed and shamble your way up to class and join us, Crowler drawled as he turned from the board where he had been previously pointing at a projected card. There was a mattering of hushed snickers coming from the row of obelisks, and even some of the Ras, but he ignored them with a practiced ease and held back the urge to make a sarcastic response to Crowler's mocking. "Sorry, Dr. Crowler," he apologized as sincerely as possible. It was hard to not just sneer it out. My deck went missing during the night, and I had to prepare a spare. Professor Banner said he'd tell you in advance, just in case I was late. Crowler pursed his lips. Yardan could practically see the gears turning in his head, whether to ridicule him again in spite of his apology and ignore the words of a fellow professor, or let it go. "Yes, I'd heard from Banner you headed out to collect that useless scrap from the card dumping grounds," he drawled insultingly, as expected. Yardan ignored the multitude of angered growls and howls flooding my ears at the insult within his mind. "How dare that hideous woman insult me?" Serpent Knight Dragon hissed venomously. It took quite a bit of effort for him not to burst out laughing. He was too much of a petty man at this point in time to give up any chance to try and insult a slifer and lord the apparent superiority of the blues over a red. "Hey now, Doctor, just because their previous owners were complete idiots that couldn't use them properly doesn't mean the cards are bad." Yardan low-key sniped right back. Judging by the way his face drew up in an affronted manner, the good doctor managed to grasp the insult. It was mostly Obelisk students who tossed their cards away there. "Ha, that's just so fitting for a piece of slifer sludge like him," someone laughed from the Obelisk row, drawing all eyes in the class. The familiar form of Chaz's bespectacled minion Yardan recognized him as rooting through the trash, right where he belongs. "Quite, young Taio," Crowler smirked and nodded his head while the rest of the blues exploded in laughter. Yardan clenched his fist. If this was back home, he'd bounce over and kick the ever-loving shit out of that pansy-ass rich boy. But things worked differently where he was now, didn't they? "And just like an Obelisk pansy, you sure do like to talk a big game, huh?" he shot back at Taio. A hush fell over the class, the only sound coming from a muffled snicker down at the very front where Yardan could see a very familiar head of Kuriboh-like hair. He casually glanced across the entire room, taking in his audience, his eyes meeting the lovely honey-brown ones of the resident #1 beauty Alexis Rhodes. She raised her eyebrow at him, but he merely smirked and turned away from her to focus on the obelisk he'd just insulted. There would be time to ogle Alexis later. For now, it was time to establish the pecking order. And Yardan didn't quite like it when people thought they could step all over him. He tended to get violent. What did you just say to me?" Taio shot up from his seat and stood up, glaring at Yardan. Yardan just let his smirk stretch up tauntingly. "You heard me, pansy," he replied. He lifted his arm up and showed the folded form of his dual disc attached to his arm. "Are you going to do something about it, or whine like a little girl?" "That's it, you loser. I'm going to crush you and show everybody how pathetic you Reds really are," Taio shouted, pulling his own dual disc from under his desk and equipping it to his arm. "Ooh, I'm shaking in my red boots," Yardan taunted right back. This was working out oh so brilliantly for him. If it was anything like the games, then Slifers earned much more DP if they beat an obelisk because of their higher ranks. It was a reward and merit-based system used to groom the up-and-comers of the world's most massive sport, a way to try and force the students to constantly improve towards the life of a pro duelist. According to the student handbook saved into the PDA at least. And heck, just 100 DP was the equivalent of 10 pounds. "Dr. Crowler, shouldn't you put a stop to this?" Alexis stood up from her seat. Yardan noticed her casting an almost worried glance in his direction. Ever the nice girl, wasn't she? But there was no need, even with his haphazardly thrown-together deck. If Taio was anything like his game counterparts, he'd have little trouble. True, my dear Alexis, but I think kicking off the year with an underdog dueling their superior would be quite exciting. Crowler waved her off. Now, boys, why don't you come down to the front so that everyone can get a good view of your duel? You hear that? Yardan laughed at Taio, making his way down the stairs with the blue-haired, bespectacled boy hot on his heels. Even your own dorm head doesn't think you can win against me. Damn Slifer sludge, Taio cursed. It took even more effort for Yardan to not just bust out laughing at how pathetic the insult was. Instead, he pulled his newly built deck from the card container strapped to his jeans and slipped them into his duel disk. He took a moment to just bask in the feeling as the duel disk beeped and came to life, uncompressing from his arm and lighting up to life. Since I was first down the stairs, I think I'll take the first move, the Slifer said to the boy opposite him. Fine, just get on with it. The Obelisk growled. Yardan LP, 4,000, Tai, 4,000. Not bad at all, Yardan thought with a smirk as he looked over the first 6 cards he drew. For the first ever hand he drew in this world as a duelist, it wasn't too shabby at all. Right then, to start my turn off, I'll be using the spell card Foolish Burial to send one monster from my deck to the graveyard, he said. He slipped the card into the spell zone and a large image of the card appeared in front of him, showing off the gravestone image imprinted on it. He grabbed Serpent Knight Dragon and slipped it into his graveyard. How stupid can you be? Taio snorted. I can't believe you actually sent one of your monsters to the graveyard. What a waste of 2 cards. He laughed. Spoken like a true blue Obelisk mook, the only thing they understood was a beat-stick strategy. Yardan honestly almost couldn't believe that the guy retained the Obelisk stupidity mentality from the anime. Not that he was going to complain, mind you. It just made getting his first win all the easier. Whatever you say, Taio, Yardan dismissed his words easily. Next up, I'm going to summon Spirit of the Breeze in defense mode and throw 3 cards face down. As soon as he inserted the cards into his duel disk, 2 large face-down cards appeared floating in front of him, and in front of them a lithe, green-skinned, blue-haired beauty, clad in a silken yellow dress, swirled into existence. Does it make me a cad that I'm totally checking her out? She apparently heard his thoughts, since she turned slightly and gave him a cheeky little wink. If he was still a virgin, he'd probably have gone all red-faced. Spirit of the Breeze, AC 1800 Def, Level 3 Wind, Fairy, Effect. That was a very interesting card for such a brazen guy to summon, especially as his first move Alexis mused. It had decent defense points, and it had an interesting effect, but it just didn't seem like a card that would fit Yardan Odhar, especially with how confident he was in the face of an obelisk. When they had met eyes, she had seen it. He had been amused by the situation he was in. There wasn't a shred of doubt in him that he couldn't beat Taio. It reminded her of a certain other student in the Red House. She'd learned her lesson in not underestimating Slifers with Jaden. Not only had he beaten Crowler and his legendary card, last night if his duel with Chaz had another few minutes, he would have taken him down as well. Could this guy be on a similar level? Ooh, she's cute. I wonder where I can get one? Mindy gushed, breaking her from her thoughts. Not exactly a strong start with how he was acting, huh? Jasmine commented, propping her head up on one hand. He's pretty good looking, but too bad a Slifer will always be a Slifer, huh? Alexis wondered how so many people could so easily dismiss the fact that he had 3 face downs on the field and had sent a card to the graveyard for a reason. Even Jasmine, someone who watched her duel constantly and had quite a versatile harpy deck, still focused so much on just flooding the field with harpies to power up her harpy's pet dragon. Alexis had the feeling that Yardan using Spirit of the Breeze was more of a feint than anything else. He didn't seem the type to shore up his life points and play stall tactics, not with how in your face he seemed to be when someone was calling him out. Right now, it was just a matter of seeing if Taio could see beneath that elitist attitude of his before he got taken out. Let's see how this plays out, Yardan thought to himself as he ended his turn. After talking big, you sure couldn't follow through, huh? Draw! Taio mocked, then drew a card. He looked over the 6 cards in his hand before shooting a smirk, Yardan's way. Let me show you how a real duelist does things. Slifer Sludge. I'm going to start off by summoning Lord of D and equipping him with the Flute of Summoning Dragon. Lord of D, 1200 AT to Carrying 1100 Def, level 4, Dark Spellcaster effect. A man in draconic bone armor appeared before Taio, before a golden dragon head-shaped flute appeared in his hands. Now that he has the flute equipped, I can go ahead and special summon 2 dragon-type monsters from my hand, Taio continued. First, I'll summon my Blackland Fire Dragon. He put the card down on the duel disc, and in a swirl of color, a large green-skinned dragon, as tall as 2 cars stacked on top of each other, burst into existence, standing tall on 4 legs and golden horns jutting out from its head. Blackland Fire Dragon, 1500 AC, 800 Dev, level 4, Dark Dragon, normal. Wow, Yardan held back a whistle. It looked so badass to see a freaking dragon like this up close and personal. He'd seen a bunch when he made his deck, but still, it was so amazing to see in real life. Now get ready, because the next one I'm bringing out is one of the aces of my deck, Taio shouted, lifting a fist into the air. Dragon born from the deepest of cursed flame, come forth and burn away my enemies. Come, curse of dragon! Wait, what? A chant? Did he have to chant when he brought out one of his ace monsters as well? A literal massive fireball flared into existence before Taio, before exploding in a shower of golden sparks to reveal a large serpentine golden dragon, with a large bladed golden tail and 2 golden wings flaring out from its neck area. Curse of Dragon, 2000 AC, 1500, level 5 Dark Dragon normal. Where he came from, he'd get laughed at for all that effort just to bring out a Curse of Dragon, especially with it being one of his ace monsters. Actually, Yardan very nearly did laugh at him, but he had to remember, at this point in the timeline, it would actually be considered fairly impressive for the guy to actually get 3 monsters on the field on his first turn, one of them being one that usually needed to be tribute summoned. The tribute summoning had only come into existence a few years back in this world, whereas for Yardan it had been about a decade, and both synchro and such were a thing where he came from, with much more powerful and easily summoned monsters were a dime a dozen. There was supposed to even be a new summoning method getting revealed soon. It ain't over yet either, Slifer. Get a hold of this. Taio placed another card on his duel disc. I play the equip spell card Dragon Treasure and equip it to my Curse of Dragon, boosting its attack and defense points by 300 each. There was a flash of green light around Curse of Dragon's head that died down to reveal a small green orb gleaming from its place inserted within the golden dragon's forehead. Curse of Dragon, 2300 at 1800 level 5 Dark Dragon normal. Now Curse of Dragon, attack his Spirit of the Breeze with Cursed Scorch Flame. Taio ordered. His dragon roared, head tilting backwards, fanged maw filling with flames, before it thrust its head down towards Yardan's monster, launching a massive fireball that absolutely dwarfed the green-skinned girl. Not bad, Yardan admitted, but not good enough either. I activate my trap card, Scrap Iron Scarecrow. Once per turn, when you initiate an attack, I can negate that attack, and what's more, my trap goes back to being face down after using it. His card flipped around, and the iron-helmeted cross he was familiar with from the 5D's anime appeared before Spirit of the Breeze, the massive fireball somehow splashing harmlessly against it, not one lick of flame getting past it despite how odd it looked. Chish, you got lucky, Taio spat out. You won't get so lucky next turn, sludge, he insulted once more, ending his turn. Yardan snorted. Whatever you say, mate, the Slifer retorted easily, drawing a card. Ha, how ironic. Now that I've drawn, Spirit of the Breeze's effect activates, and I gain a whole 1,000 life points. Spirit of the Breeze turned to Yardan and blew him a kiss, a radiant green wind then surrounding him. Yardan LP 5,000. Don't think shoring up on life points will help you, Taio growled at him. He wasn't. He, after all, didn't have nearly enough of the right cards to use his favored life point gaining strategy. Besides, he was 1 card away from taking this guy down in 1 full-out offense. I activate Pot of Greed and draw 2 cards, Yardan declared, drawing 2 cards. Then he laughed. Graceful Dice and Dragon's Gunfire. Gunfire, just what he wanted. And he supposed the Graceful Dice could just be a little added-on mockery while he was at it. What are you laughing at, sludge boy? Taio demanded. Yardan shot him a smug, victorious grin. just basking in my wind, pansy boy. He insulted him right back. Let me show you what I mean, nice and slowly, so your pea-sized brain can keep up. He revealed one of his face-down cards. I activate my trap card, Call of the Haunted, to revive the monster I sent to the graveyard with foolish burial, Yardan said, then lifted one hand before his face and clenched it into a fist. Time to bullshit and steal lines from somebody else. Dragon, formed from the pitch-black night. Come forth, the darkness of my very soul, Serpent Knight Dragon, he announced. Totally not paraphrasing from Kaiba and Jack Atlas. Not at all. An orb of shimmering darkness appeared before Yardan, before bursting apart to reveal the lithe and beautifully graceful form of Serpent Knight Dragon. Now that I've been summoned, victory is certain, my ace monster declared, a silky voice oozing confidence. Serpent Knight Dragon, 2350 AgCAC 2400 Def, Level 7 Dark, Dragon, Normal. But it isn't over yet, because I activate my final face-down card, Tyrant Wing, and equip it to Serpent Knight Dragon. Yardan continued as the card flipped around to face-up position. This not only increases a dragon monster of my choosing's attack by 400, it also lets them make a second attack on monsters during the battle phase. Serpent Knight. Dragon's wings grew out to massive proportions and started to glow a bright golden white, so bright, Yardan actually had to shield his eyes slightly from the glow. Serpent Knight Dragon, 2750 at 2400 Def, Level 7 Dark, Dragon, Normal. He saw Taio opening his mouth, but cut him off before he could say anything himself. But even then I'm still not finished and activate the quick play spell card Graceful Dice from my hand. In front of him, a large blue dice piece shimmered into existence, before shooting into the air and rapidly spinning. Whatever number it lands on, my monsters gain attack and defense points equal to it, multiplied by 100 for the rest of the turn. It landed on 5. Serpent Knight Dragon, 3250 ACAC 2900 Def, Level 7 Dark, Dragon, Normal. Spirit of the Breeze, 500 2300 Def, Level 3 Wind Effect. And no way! Taio stammered, looking at his ace monster with wide eyes and a gaping mouth. 3250 attack points. That's even stronger than a Blue Eyes. This duel's over, Yardan smirked again, then pointed at Taio's monsters. Serpent Knight Dragon, destroy Lord of D and Blackland Fire Dragon with your... He floundered for a moment. Ebony Flame, he finally decided on. Had a bit of trouble there, did you? Serpent Knight Dragon teased him before following his order. He twisted his serpentine head from right to left. The dragon breathed out a wave of pure flak flames that rushed over the field and easily consumed both monsters, destroying them with ease. Taio LP, 200. Taio glared over at him as the flames died down and left his field with 2 less monsters, and him having taken a massive 3,800 points of damage. Don't go thinking you've won yet, Sludge. This is just a setback. I'll definitely take you down next turn. The blue-haired Obelisk shouted at him in a rage. There's no way a useless slifer like you will ever get the better of an Obelisk like me. Well, that was just sad. But it was time to put this idiot's delusions to rest. Yardan looked at the last 2 cards in his hand, Ukazi and Dragon's Gunfire. He had originally planned on using them both, but with how high his roll was on the graceful dice, it looked like he only needed one. Perfect. He could save one in advance. To have people thinking he could only deal 800 burn damage, when instead he could deal 1,600. When playing at 4,000 life points, that was a hefty amount. Sorry, Pansy Boy, but like I said, this duel is over, Yardan said, placing and playing Ukazi. I activate the spell card in my hand, Ukazi, dealing you a grand total of 800 points of damage. A large fireball appeared before him, before shooting across the room like a rocket. Taio screamed in fright as it reached him and exploded, falling on his backside, despite the fact that it was merely a hologram. A hush fell over the classroom, but Yardan barely noticed. He was far too invested in pulling out his PDA when it let out 3 loud beeps. Name Yardan Odhar, year, first year dorm, Slifer Red Day, 02 DP, 1630. I just made 163 pounds in 10 minutes by beating a guy at a card game. Even after everything he had seen today so far, it was surreal. Almost enough to put Yardan into a daze. But with this, he had enough to go buy some booster packs. Useless things. He heard Taio mutter as the monster holograms faded from around them. I thought dragons were supposed to be tough. Kaiba freaking uses them. But you were absolutely useless. Couldn't even beat a piece of scum slifer. The blue-haired teen grasped his desk tightly in his hands, looking as if he was about to rip them before he scoffed and stamped his way back up to his feet, amongst the sudden cheers from the slifers and jeers from the other obelisks due to him losing. Yardan couldn't bring himself to have any sympathy for the idiot. He brought it on himself with his attitude, and Yardan remembered from the anime that later down the line he'd snub Chaz in an attempt to bully him because he lost to Jaden. Although his attitude and anger at his deck for losing might just be a good thing, for Yardan that was. He called out to Serpent Knight Dragon in his mind. "What can I help you with, Master?" the dragon asked. "Can you keep an eye on him? And if he tosses his deck, can you bring it to me?" Yardan asked internally. "It shouldn't be a problem. I have enough power in me to exert the physical strain it would take to lift a deck of cards." His ace monster replied. "Perfect. If all went well, then he might just get himself a Curse of Dragon and a bunch of other dragon-based cards without any effort whatsoever." Unlike Taio, Yardan was much more suited to such cards. An ungrateful idiot like him wouldn't be able to appreciate them like he could. Plus, he totally needed them more. Alexis couldn't fight the smile formed on her lips. "Well now, wasn't that interesting?" she mused, her eyes tracking the form of Yardan Odhar as he took a seat among the slifers, receiving many a pat on the back and congratulations. "Well yeah, he's like totally cute," Mindy replied. "It shouldn't be too long before a guy like that ranks up and then he'll be total dating material." "Let's not get too hasty, Mindy," Jasmine piped in. "Sure, he seems to be a decent duelist, but we literally only saw him take 2 turns. It's a pretty far cry to say he's Obelisk material. He's totally not anywhere near Alexis' level. That play was hardly decent, and Jasmine really needed to take her off that pedestal she placed her on. And besides, shouldn't the fact that he just beat an Obelisk with ease mean the boy was certain Obelisk material himself? That combo he played was definitely worthy of a real Obelisk and not one of the rich prep boys that got in on money alone and no skill. He played Taio like a fiddle, and even with the Obelisk boy's powerful start, Yardan smashed it into pieces with ease. What was that, a 7-part combo? More, if she included the way Yardan riled Taio up and led him along, and then feigned strategies and lacking attack power with Spirit of the Breeze, so a 9 or 10-part combo strategy then? Yardan Odhar, just like Jaden Yuki, was definitely someone Alexis was going to keep her eye on. She wondered if Zayn would want to hear about him. Zayn was extremely focused on dragon monsters, even if his main ones were machine dragons now, since he learned the cyber style. He'd probably be interested in the plays of a talented up-and-coming dragon user like Yardan. The rest of the day had been utterly brutal for Yardan. As if listening to teachers drone on and on about things he already knew about dueling and had known since before he was a teenager for hours wasn't bad enough. After that, he had to go through normal classes as well. Normal classes that were at a higher level than he was used to, due to Duel Academy being one of the top premier schools of the world. He could barely keep up. And then to add on to the absurdity of it all, he had to sit through an hour of Professor Banner lecture on alchemy of all things. He knew it was actually a real thing in this world, and Banner could manipulate his very soul and create bodies to inhabit, but it was still absurd and entirely too complicated. All of it just added more onto his massive throbbing headache. And adding to his bad day even more, and making his headache worse, was the sheer annoyance of having to listen to the Obelisk's boast and brag every 2 minutes. True, it was the preppy cunts that did it, but still, if this was in his old world, he would have dragged those twats behind the school with a few friends and kicked the shit out of them. He kind of wanted to do it regardless. Honestly, the only good points about today were watching Cyrus flounder about and gym class with Miss Fontaine. Yardan mused to himself, rubbing his throbbing forehead as he walked through the throngs of students traversing the corridors after classes finally let out for the day. Cyrus was in general a complete steaming pile of incompetence wrapped up in a nice lovely bow of skittishness. Watching him fail at literally everything had made him want to cringe and even make him of all people feel a bit sorry for him. The highlight of the day, though, was during gym, where Fontaine had tested their stamina by taking the entire class on a jog and seeing how long the students could hold up for. This body wasn't as fit as his previous body, but it was in decent shape, and he knew how to pace himself and retain stamina during a run. So he'd managed to finish in the top percentage of the class, lasting until the end alongside Fontaine herself, Jaden, Bastion, Alexis, her two friends Jasmine and Mindy, and Chaz himself. He honestly couldn't wait for the next gym class, and not even for the chance to work out more, which he loved to do. It was for the fringe benefit of watching Fontaine, Alexis, Jasmine, and Mindy bouncing around as they exerted themselves so much. They were all so damn stacked. It was so worth it. All the trouble it must be for normal students to enroll in Duel Academy, just for the chance to watch such an amazing show every time gym class came up. Not that he found the dueling class aspect to be hard at all so far. Honestly, everything that had been lectured about for hours in class today had been covered in the first few paragraphs of the rule books out of starter decks where he came from. Yardan really wondered how people could do so badly in those exams to end up in Slifer. If the classes so far were anything to go by, he would have gotten into the top percentile of raw yellow with ease. Granted, he wasn't exactly a genius like Bastion. He was decidedly average as far as intelligence went, maybe a bit above average at best. But then a child version of himself could have got perfect marks on the dueling classes today, so was he above average in this reality? He shook his head as he finally reached his destination, the card shop run by Dorothy, whom he could see standing behind the glass counter, and the cute girl Sadie standing beside an open cart, filled to the brim with small packages that radiated an abundance of scents. Egg witches, if I remember right. Yardan thought to himself. So do I need to pay for these, or are they free? Yardan asked, stopping in front of Sadie and shooting the cute older girl what he hoped was a suave smile. She smiled at him brightly. You have to pay for these, sweetie, 100 DP per pick, and you can only buy one per day, she replied. He almost gaped at her. 100 DP, that was 10 pounds. That much for basically a burger. Seriously? She must have noticed the aghast expression that appeared on his face because she continued quickly. There are cards in every packet alongside the egg witches. It all comes down to the luck of the draw. The better tasting egg witch you get, the better the card inside. It's supposed to test how good you students are when it comes to something called a destiny draw. Well, wasn't that destiny draw was vaguely mentioned in every season of the anime, but never outright confirmed in anything but the games. Yardan totally wanted to try his luck at it, so he quickly paid the fee, and it was so convenient, he only had to give her his student ID, and she could take it from his total amount of DP. Good luck. Sadie chirped with a cute wink as he reached into the cart, right down to the very bottom, as far as he could go, and then swiped his hand through them all. When he felt one fall into his palm, he grasped it tightly and pulled it out. He took an experimental sniff of it and smiled. It smelled good. Really good, in fact. He opened up the wrapped egg witch and Sadie gasped. You got the golden egg witch. The very first one of the year even. How lucky. She gushed. And she was right. It was freaking golden. The bun seemed to glow with a warm golden glow, and even the egg white he could see peeking out from the bun was gold itself instead of white, and there sat innocently atop the bun was the card he got with it. Yardan had to fight off a smile as he looked it over. Say are you, 2500 at Kek, 2300 def, level 7 light, dragon. Looks like destiny is on my side, huh? He joked to Sadie, giving her a cheeky little wink right back. He took it as a personal accomplishment when she beamed happily at him. He couldn't believe his luck. As far as the meta went back in his own world before he ended up here, it was a pretty subpar card, with no support at all, and really would only do anything decent in a Blue Eyes deck. But for where and when he was, it was a pretty amazing card. Oh wow, a say are you, Sadie commented over his shoulder as he looked the card over. They usually go for a good 3000 DP at the cheapest when we sell them on display. Actually, the one we have on display is at 4000, I think. Damn, that was damn expensive for just a decent beat stick. That was another little interesting tidbit she just revealed. Quickly sliding his new card into his deck box and rewrapping his egg witch, he He planned to really sit down and enjoy it later. He turned to face. "Can I get a look at those cards?" Yardan asked the older girl. "I want to see if there's any that'll fit my deck." "Sure, no problem. But since it's your first day and all, I feel I should give you a little heads up first and tell you that the very cheapest we've got on display are like 300 DP, Sadie replied, and he had to hold back a whistle. The very cheapest were the equivalent of 30 pounds. A couple weeks before he ended up here, he ordered a random assortment of cards in a Duelist tin over the internet, with a grand total of 150 cards inside, many of which were rather good cards, including a couple red eyes, and it had only cost him 15 pounds. It took a concentrated effort on Yardan's part not to mush his face up against the glass display case as he eagerly looked over the single cards up for sale. Polymerization 300 DP, Mystic Space Typhoon 300 DP, Thunder Dragon 450 DP apiece, Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon 1000 DP. He'd definitely come back for them when he won a few more duels. Ooh, Carbondon 450 DP, and limiter removal for the same amount. That would go really well with the Metal Dragon he picked up at the Reject Well. He already had a beast combo in mind. Fuse Lesser Dragon and King of the Swamp to get Metal Dragon. Metal Dragon was a level 6, so he could equip it with his Fusion Weapon Equip card, bringing it from 1850 attack points to 33,350. Then he could use limiter removal and double its attack to 6,700, then bounce it back to his hand with Giant Trunade, and use it again to get a massive 13,400 attack points. Now, if he could possibly get his hands on a power bond from Cyrus or Zayn, he could switch the initial polymerization with it and make it even stronger. Oh, the possibilities! Hell, even just an initial power bonding to make Metal Dragon would get him a 3,700 attack point beat stick, and he could just Rainbow Life or something to negate the damage from Power Bond. There was one final card that caught his eye, a spell card at the very end, half hidden under another card and hidden quite a bit from view. He narrowed his eyes as he tried to make out the partially hidden text, before they widened in shock when he realized what card it was. Revived Serpent Knight Dragon. The only ever support for Serpent Knight Dragon, but wasn't it a game-only card? He quickly pointed the card out to Sadie. "Hey, can I see that card?" Yardan asked. "Sure," she replied, opening up the display case and bringing it out, handing it to him. Revive Serpent Knight Dragon, quick play spell card. Tribute one monster on the field, then special summon one Serpent Knight Dragon from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Holy crap, this was such a good card for him, and even if Sayaru was a bit stronger, this pretty much totally cemented Serpent Knight Dragon as his ace monster. The fact that it was a quick play just made it all the better and filled with even more potential. He totally had to buy it. "How much is this?" Yardan asked. It was originally 500 DP, but since nobody's been buying or even really using Serpent Knight Dragon anymore, it's been in the display case and up for sale for like a year by this point. Sadie replied. She tapped her chin in thought before smiling at him a moment later. "I'll give you it for 250. How's that sound, cutie?" She winked at him again. Hadn't both Mindy and Jasmine called him cute earlier? He'd been paying attention to Alexis in the corner of his vision while he dueled Taio, and he was sure they did. And now Sadie thought he was cute as well? Was it because he was essentially the player from Tag Force? There was a literal meme Yardan remembered where his title was the Red Hat Player, because he got so many of the female characters to fall in love with him during the games. Off the top of his head, he knew Alexis, Blair, Akiza, Luna, and even Sherry all fell in love with the player if their storylines were completed. Suddenly, Yardan quite liked the position he found himself in, even with the imminent threat of multiple Apocapes. Apolsipsy? Even with the multiple apocalypse that he'd have to fight his way through, things were looking interesting. "I'll take it. And I want one of those Carbondon and limiter removal as well, please, Sadie," Yardan stated after ridding himself of the sudden Casanova-like daydream that threatened to take over his mind. Sadie was quick to hand him the 3 cards and charge him for them. He mentally winced. He basically just spent 150 pounds on 3 cards that usually wouldn't even cost 5 pounds together back home, but it had to be done. He slipped them into his deck box quickly. "Can I see your booster packs now, Sadie?" He then asked the older girl behind the display case. She nodded. "Sure," she chirped happily, leaning down and one by one pulling out an assortment of boxes that she placed on top of the display case, a grand total of 14 of them. Smart, because obviously she wouldn't leave expensive items like the cards were in this world out front for just anyone to pilfer. Metal Raiders, Spell Rulers, Pharaoh's Servant, Labyrinth of Nightmare, Legacy of Darkness, Pharaonic Guardian, Magician's Force, Dark Crisis, Invasion of Chaos, Ancient Sanctuary, Kaibaman Rising Movie Pack, Soul of the Duelist, Dark Beginnings 1, and Rise of Destiny. Yardan was familiar with all of them to a degree, besides the Kaibaman Rising one, although many of them had different images on the front, and he only knew which was which because they were named. "They're all 250 DP each," Sadie told him as soon as she set down the last box. He looked each of them over before deciding to check with his monsters. "Can any of you guys sense any spirits in these?" he asked internally. Ooh, I sense one, a strong one, in the Dark Beginnings one." Baby Dragon piped up excitedly in his mind. "Just go through them and I'll tell you which one he's in. If he gives you any trouble, don't worry, I'll just beat him up for you." One thing he'd learned so far, thanks to how enthusiastic the buff little orange dragon was how much Baby Dragon liked to fight. Plus, Baby Dragon did technically help make up the strongest monster in his deck right now. Well, besides the Seiryu he just got from the Egg Witch. With Baby Dragon's guidance, he grabbed the booster pack containing the spirit, before turning to Sadie, who looked at him with a bit of a raised eyebrow. He had, after all, basically lifted out most of the packs, just to grab that one before putting them back. It probably looked quite weird from her point of view. He didn't really want to try and think up some excuse, so he just paid for the pack grudgingly before beating a hasty retreat. He totally wasn't embarrassed either. He just needed to check out his new cards and tune up his deck before Jaden got roped into dueling Alexis that night. He quickly made his way back to his dorm, and only when the door closed behind him did he finally open the booster pack and look through the 12 cards? Wow. You only got 5 out of a booster pack nowadays where he was from. He forgot about the sheer amount of cards you used to get from booster packs. Whoa, badass. Yardan gasped as he looked down at the first card glaring back at him. Black Skull Dragon! He couldn't use it, but still, fucking Black Skull Dragon. He laughed in a joyful glee. Next after that was another Spirit of the Breeze. He was definitely putting that in his main deck for now. Double summon out his original and this new version, and then protect them, and he could be getting 2,000 extra life points per turn. Suck it, bitches. Alexis was so wrong about how he liked to play. He loved shoring up on life points while blocking his opponents and smashing them with burn damage, and keep some big beastly dragons on the prowl ready to run them over. Granted, he did also love to just completely overwhelm people with massive attack points as well. Next up was Monster Reborn. Lovely. After that, Harpy's Brother, a decent beat stick, and then Giant Soldier of Stone. United We Stand, Enchanted Javelin, Black Pendant, motherfucking Spellbinding Circle, another great card that was definitely going in the deck. Premature Burial was the 11th card. Then, when Yardan reached the last card, there was a swirl of glittering light before a large, slender bipedal dragon with large wings appeared before him, its body made up of beautiful, glittering diamonds. Interesting. I can sense multiple spirits with you, human, Haozanryu commented, looking over Yardan curiously. The reincarnated Slifer couldn't fight off the grin that appeared on his face. Haozanryu, 2100 AC, 2800 Def, level 7 Slight, Dragon Normal. Chapter 3. Hours later, when the sun fell from the sky and the moon replaced it, dusk replacing day, Yardan found himself sitting at the docks that would lead towards the Obelisk Blue Girl's dorm. He'd made sure to come out here once he'd saw Cyrus leaving the dorms behind. It was maybe a bit creepy of him, but if he wanted the attention of Alexis and the other girls around, intruding on the first duel against her, after they caught Cyrus, would be the best time to do it. Plus, as cold as it was, and this body definitely wasn't as used to the mild cold as his old one was, it did give him some peace and quiet to come to terms with his situation. He'd panicked earlier about not having any cards and about all the crap that would hit the island he was on in the next couple of years, and now realized how incredibly silly he was. He had so much time to prepare at this point, it wasn't even worth being a major worry right now. Not to mention, he was in another world now, in a different body, one not his own, one belonging to someone he'd previously believed to be fictional. He didn't really want to think on it too much, because he'd left everything behind, his family, his possessions, his life. But it was daunting nonetheless, and he was very sure that this wasn't some fever dream. He really had no other choice but to throw himself right in at this point. He had no idea where to even start on returning home. And in the end, he might not want to considering the possible options open to him here. But regardless, to make a life for himself here in the meantime, he'd need to abuse his knowledge of the world and take every advantage he could get, with ruthless efficiency. At least if he focused on gaining as much as he could, he wouldn't need to focus on what he'd lost coming here. "Are you done wallowing?" the voice of Petite Dragon asked within his mind. "It's not nice to eavesdrop, you know," Yardan replied back with a roll of his eyes. "But yes, I'm done being a little bitch. I'm just passing the time now for Jaden to come along. And it shouldn't be that long until then. Cirrus had already rowed off in a boat 20 minutes ago." "Good. Then if you have nothing else to do, I'll let you know that the bonding is complete," the small dragon told him. "You should bond with Decoy Dragon now." That was quick. "I thought you guys told me that it would take a while for my soul's power to grow accustomed to housing you," Yardan replied. "And I told you earlier, I'm a fairly weak monster." Petite Dragon replied with a huff. "You may see a very minor increase to your physical ability and senses, but other than that, nothing much. Because I'm weak, it didn't take long at all for your soul to grow accustomed to the bond with me. Decoy Dragon should be enough to boost your soul to a strength needed to bond with a stronger monster like Fairy Dragon or Baby Dragon. Then you can bond fully with the rest of the other low-leveled spirits you picked up today." "Well, fair enough," Yardan guessed. Petite Dragon would know better than he did. "All right," he agreed. Reaching into his deck box, Yardan lifted his deck out and flicked through his cards until he found the one he was looking for. Decoy Dragon. "You ready?" he asked the card. The card shimmered, and a moment later, Decoy Dragon's translucent fur appeared in front of him. The tiny turquoise-blue dragon, little bigger than his hand, looked up at him shyly. "Okay," he squeaked. And before Yardan could say anything else, the little dragon turned into a ball of light and entered his chest. He shuddered a bit as a warm energy flowed through his veins, but he shook it off. It wasn't unpleasant at all, and he was quite happy with how things were progressing. Weak or not, that was the second bond he'd formed today with his new monsters. He was well on his way to gaining the power he sought. "I have returned, Master," the silky voice of Serpent Knight Dragon suddenly spoke up from behind him. Yelping in fright at the voice coming out of nowhere, Yardan jumped up from where he was sitting, whirling around fists up in preparation to attack, only to find his boss monster looking at him with a dry expression. "Really now?" The graceful serpentine dragon huffed, rolling his eyes. "The master of one such as I should not be so skittish." Yardan huffed, lowering his fists and pressing one hand to his frantically beating heart. Yeah, he growled at the dragon monster spirit. "So, was my hunch right? Did he toss any of his cards?" Serpent Knight Dragon eyed him drearily for a few more moments before sighing and narrowing his head. "Indeed, you were right," the spirit responded. He lifted his tail and brought it around, and Yardan noted there was a card held with his tail coiled gently around it in the air. Only the one, though. He deposited the card into Yardan's hand, and he couldn't help but grin as he saw the card looking back at him. Curse of Dragon, Level 5 Dark, Dragon 2000-1500. "Perfect, this will go well with this deck," he noted in satisfaction, placing it in his deck box along with the rest of his deck. "If you say so, Master." Serpent Knight Dragon bowed his head slightly. "Now, I believe I shall take the time to have a little rest and meet the newest spirit you have obtained." With that parting farewell, the dragon shimmered out of view and returned to his card, just in time for the rhythm of rapid footfalls to enter, followed by the sounds of loud, large breaths of exertion. Yardan looked over to the path that led through the tree line towards the Slifer dorms, just in time for a familiar Karibo-haired individual to bust out of the tree line, running towards where he was now, the docks. Jaden Yuki. Despite himself, Yardan could barely contain the excitement of seeing one of his favorite characters in the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise in the flesh. Jaden slowed to a stop as he caught sight of Yardan. "Hey dude, what are you doing out here?" The brown-haired teen asked, eyebrows narrowing a bit. Yardan resisted the urge to blink. That seemed completely out of character for Jaden. It took him a moment to remember just why he was out there, and remembering that Alexis sent him an audio clip, masking her voice and blackmailing him with Cyrus's safety as a selling point to make him turn up for a duel. Not letting anything show on his face, Yardan raised an eyebrow at him. "I was sitting out here enjoying the view," he lied blatantly with a shrug. "What are you doing out here, though? And rushing this way so fast? The only thing in this direction is the girls' dorm." Jaden tensed up, and Yardan could see the indecision on his face. The second-generation protagonist was a very open person early on before Yubel came back. He wore his heart on his sleeve. "Is something wrong?" Yardan asked, faking some worry into his voice. It was a dick move and made him feel bad for manipulating a guy like Jaden. Because this wasn't fiction anymore for him. This boy in front of him was a real person. But this was his life now. To gain a good life here, one he desired, a few white lies and manipulations were necessary. He'd make it up to Jaden and co. later when he made sure they got through things easier later on. Shoulder slumping, Jaden sighed in defeat. "My buddy Cyrus got caught trespassing at the girls' dorm, apparently," he admitted reluctantly. "I got a call telling me to come meet them or he's going to get expelled." "Shit," Yardan cursed. "Is someone targeting us Slifers?" he asked, continuing the ruse. "Dunno, dude, but I really need to get a move on." Jaden shrugged. Now that he had apparently confirmed Yardan wasn't a part of things, he was eager to move on. The Kuribo-haired teen walked over and past Yardan, stepping down the dock and jumping into one of the rowboats floating in the water. Now was his chance, and Yardan was going to take it with arms wide open. Turning, he walked down behind Jaden and jumped into the boat beside him. "What are you doing?" Jaden asked. Yardan clenched his hand into a fist and held it up with a grin. "I'm your backup in case this is some plot by some obelisks to jump you," he responded. "If it is, I'll kick their asses." Jaden snorted. "Well, glad to have you watching my back, pal," he responded. He sat down and began to row the oars. "Grab a seat to make sure you don't fall into the water." Following his advice, Yardan sat down on one of the benches in the boat. "Let's do this, mate," he grinned, clapping Jaden on the shoulder. "There he is!" Mindy jumped up excitedly, pointing out into the distance from the docks the four of them stood on, towards an approaching rowboat with two figures in it, though it looks like Jaden didn't come alone. "It's Odhar." Jasmine raised an eyebrow in interest. She would have crossed her arms under her prodigious bust, but her hands were currently full with the rope tied around the blue-haired boy the three girls had taken prisoner. "Wonder what he's doing here. From what he was like in class earlier, he doesn't seem like the type that would lend a hand easily." Alexis, who did have her arms crossed underneath her breasts, merely smirked in satisfaction. "I don't care either way," the blonde replied. "He was my next target after I took down Jaden anyway. This just saves me the time of seeing more of his skill in person." Cirrus whimpered, but was ignored. Mindy sighed. "You're never going to get a boyfriend like that." The black-haired girl shook her head sadly. "Odhar was a total tough guy type with Taio earlier. You'll scare all the guys away if you consider someone like that. Just pray to duel and beat." Alexis rolled her eyes. No matter how many times she told them, she just wasn't interested in a boyfriend as things were right now. They wouldn't let it go. Not that there were many good candidates around her anyway. You'd think with how boy-crazy Jasmine and Mindy were sometimes that they'd have gotten boyfriends of their own by now. But they turned down nearly as many boys as her that asked them out. Moments later, the rowboat hit shore, and the two Slifer-red teenagers stepped out of the boat onto dry land. "Hi, Jaden. Hi, Yardan." Cyrus greeted them both sadly. "Hey," Jaden greeted him back softly. "So what exactly is going on here?" he asked. eyes shooting up sharply to take in the three girls, most specifically Jasmine, who was holding the rope that had him tied up. Well, to make a long story short, I'm basically a big loser, Cyrus moaned in defeat. Don't be so melodramatic, Cyrus, Yardan cut in with a roll of his eyes. At least the eye candy was good, right? Mindy tittered a bit at the compliment, cheeks flushing a light red, and Alexis had to internally praise the boy for his sheer confidence in this situation. She was right to want to keep an eye on him. After all, it didn't take a genius to figure out now that he and Jaden were here alongside Cyrus. They could be reported and expelled as well. Yet still, looking over the Scottish teenager, who had a lazy smirk on his face, hands resting in his pocket, he seemed to believe he was in total control. Maybe it was something to do with being European? Alexis didn't have much experience with people from outside of Japan. But Pierre, the French boy she grew up with, was a cocky guy no matter the situation. Jasmine huffed. Your friend here trespassed into the girls' campus. The redhead got straight to the point. Is that true, Sai? Jaden asked. I doubt it. Yardan rolled his eyes before looking up to meet Alexis's eyes. No offense, but Cyrus doesn't have the guts to come here peeking. Pull the other one. It seemed he wouldn't be fooled. Alexis stared right back into his eyes and was surprised to find he was amused. He rose an eyebrow at her in challenge, and the blonde-haired girl realized the jig was pretty much up. Not that it mattered, she'd gotten what she wanted regardless. And a bonus on top of things. Jaden and Yardan both laid out for her to pick from. She wasn't arrogant enough to think she could take them 2-on-1. So who to pick? True, Jaden agreed. So out with it. What the heck is going on here? This is getting too far to be called a joke, he demanded. Well, it doesn't matter now. Mindy smiled at both boys, eyes focused more on Yardan than Jaden. Now that you're both here, you're trespassing too. That's right, boys. Alexis grinned at them in a predatory fashion. If you want to get out of here without being expelled, you'll have to win your freedom by beating us in a duel. She'd rather take Jaden on right now. His skills were more known to her. His deck focused around hero monsters. Yardan, though, his deck was made just this morning from thrown-away cards, yet he seemed so confident in the deck he had. He was more mysterious. Best let Jasmine and Mindy take him on so she could see more of his skill first before she took him on. If he was as good as she thought he was, he should be able to overcome them both. Oh man, I don't want to get expelled. It's only been a few days. Cyrus whined pitifully. So that's your play, Yardan snorted, shaking his head. Fair enough, bring it on. Don't worry, Sai, Jaden interjected at the same time, punching a fist into his palm. I won't let that happen. Bring it on, Alexis. Yardan and Jaden blinked as they finished, looking at each other. Jinx, they grinned at each other. Both boys were surprisingly on a rather similar wavelength, it seemed. Minutes later, while Jaden and Alexis were out on the open water in a pair of boats, facing off all dramatic-like, Yardan stood across from Mindy and Jasmine, having preferred to just stay on solid ground for his duel. He'd rather not risk dropping his cards into the ocean and ruin them. So how are we doing this? Yardan asked, smirking at the girls, practically oozing confidence. Truth be told, he was just giddy at being alone with two absolutely gorgeous, absolutely stacked girls. Cyrus had dutifully followed Jaden out onto the boats, and truth be told, he was totally okay with that. He'd never been that into Cyrus, truth be told. We'll keep it simple, Jasmine held out her hand, activating her duel disc. All three of us have 4,000 life points each, though this will be a 2-on-1, so after I take my first turn, you're free to attack on your turn. That fine with you? Yeah, simple, Yardan snorted. I suppose the fact that Mindy having a turn after me and you going right after her, meaning you get 2 turns back-to-back as a team, is fair? Oh, you know my name? Mindy cut in, smiling widely. Of course I do, Yardan shrugged. You, Alexis, and Jasmine here are by far the 3 most beautiful girls in our year, possibly the entire school. It's hard not to know who are you. Aw, shucks, you flatterer, Mindy laughed before wagging her finger. Don't think complimenting us will make us go easy on you, though, cutie. We're way out of your league, kid. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Now let's get this over with. I want to watch Alexis wipe the floor with your pal Jaden. But to make it fair, let's say you can attack on your first turn then, okay? With that said, she drew 6 cards. Jasmine, Mindy, 4,000. Yardan, 4,000. Quite the high sense of opinion of yourself, huh? Yardan shook his head, but followed suit and drew 5 cards, Mindy copying him. But sure, let's hurry this along. I've got things to do tonight. Not to mention, he was incredibly excited to see how much DP he earned for taking on 2 Obelisk students at once, in a 2-on-1. We'll see how cocky you are after we're through with you, Odhar, Jasmine huffed. And I'll start that off by summoning my cyber harpy lady in attack mode. There was a shimmer of light in front of her, and a moment later, a tall, bodacious blue-skinned woman in metal bikini armor appeared before her. Feathers hanging from her arms and legs, curling down into bird feet and talons. Cyber Harpy Lady, Level 4, Wind, Winged Beast, Effect, 1800-1300. Not a bad monster at all. Actually, an 1800 attack point beat stick at this point in time was pretty rare, especially one that had a decent effect and not a detrimental one. But I'm not done yet. I equip my Cyber Harpy Lady with Cyber Armor, increasing her attack points by 500. The redhead continued, and finish off my turn by placing 1 card face down. A card facing face down shimmered into existence. At the same time, the armor her Harpy Lady was wearing gleamed brightly as the equip card took effect. Cyber Harpy Lady, Level 4, Wind, Winged Beast, Effect, 2300-1300. Yardan whistled as he drew his 6th card, his turn beginning. Not bad, getting a monster with 2300 attack out on the first turn and shoring up with something to defend it. He praised the girl. It wasn't really. It was something any child where he was from could do with ease. But here and now, it was actually something quite well done, he supposed. Still, it put Jasmine quite a bit above the average duelist on this island just to play a combo like that. Yet you don't actually seem all that impressed, Jasmine noted knowingly. And he had to give it to her. The girl was sharp. Let's see if Alexis is actually onto something, and you really do have talent. Sure, but don't blink or you might miss it gorgeous. He winked at her, and took some pride in the way this time. Her cheeks actually flushed a tiny bit from the bold flirting. I'll start off nice and simple with Pot of Greed and draw 2 cards. With that said, he drew 2 cards and looked them over, smirking happily at his draws. He was so glad his deck was full of spirits. It was honestly kind of cheating, but honestly, if fucking Yugi could do it without guilt, so could he. I'll take care of your equip card and face down with Giant Trunade next. Yardan followed up, placing a card down. A massive green vortex howled through the area, and the face down and gleam of her monster's armor disappeared, returned to her hand. But I'm not anywhere close to done yet, because now I play Foolish Burial to send the Carbondon in my deck to the graveyard. That card again? Jasmine blinked. Planning on summoning that monster from the graveyard? I'm not sure what it is, but it sounds like a dinosaur monster, so I'm guessing it has pretty good attack points. Actually, I'm going to use its effect to banish it from my graveyard to special summon any level 7 dragon monster from anywhere in my deck. Yardan grinned cheekily. Say hello to my Sayaru. Sayaru, level 7 light dragon, 2500-2300. In a burst of light, a large and beautiful shining pink metallic dragon appeared before Yardan on the field, and it was a beauty. Yardan had to take a moment just to admire such a lovely, actually reminded him a bit of the Pokemon Skarmory. 2,500 attack points, Mindy gasped. Geez, maybe you really are that good. Jasmine grimaced. Yardan wagged his finger at the two. Hold your horses, girl. This is no time to be impressed, 'cause I ain't done yet, he teased. You're kidding, Jasmine gaped. Nope, he chuckled. Following up Sayaru, I'm using the spell card Cost Down. Now by discarding 1 card to the graveyard from my hand, all monsters in my hand have their levels lowered by 2. And I'm discarding my Hyozanryu, allowing me to summon my Curse of Dragon. The familiar golden serpentine dragon used by Taio earlier today appeared in front of Yardan, and he relished the moment. Curse of Dragon, level 5-3, Dark Dragon, 2000-1500. Hey, where'd you get that? Mindy gasped. Isn't that Taio's card? No way you just found that card. It's one of the main cards used by Yugimoto. They're worth tons of money. Finders keepers, and Taio had a hissy fit and threw it away after I creamed him. Yardan shrugged. Still, now I'll play my Monster Reborn to summon my Hyozanryu from the graveyard in attack position. In another burst of light, his newest spirit appeared before him, tall and graceful with a gleaming bipedal diamond body that glittered beautifully in the moonlight. Hyozanryu, level 7, Light Dragon, 2100-2800. Humph, quite the lineup you've gotten for one turn, the dragon commented, nodding his head in respect. Oh geez, are you finally done? Jasmine groaned, palming her pretty face. Because seriously, Odhar, you're kind of ridiculous. Just one last thing, he laughed and placed down one final card. I'm playing the spell card Revived Serpent Knight Dragon. You'll love this. It lets me sacrifice any monster on the field to summon a Serpent Knight Dragon from my hand, deck, or graveyard. And I choose to sacrifice your Cyber Harpy Lady. Say what? Jasmine gasped. The girl was looking at him wide-eyed, shocked to the core. He couldn't blame her, because this card was seriously overpowered. If his opponent had nothing to stop it with, he could basically destroy any monster on the field to summon the ace of his deck. One of the most bullshit cards he'd ever come across. God, the anime world was absurd. Cyber Harpy Lady gave a shriek of dismay before shattering out of existence. The shards of light left behind by her immediately swarmed over onto Yardan's field, and from them, Serpent Knight Dragon emerged. Serpent Knight Dragon, level 7 Dark Dragon, 2350-2400. You've got to be kidding me, Jasmine muttered. 4 monsters, all of them level 5 or over, with 2,000 or more attacks points, all in the one turn, while leaving me with nothing on my field at the same time. Aw, I'm not even going to get a turn, am I? Mindy pouted before shaking her head and smiling wryly. Well, at least Alexis will be happy that she was proven right. Sayaryu and Hyozanryu attack Jasmine directly, and Serpent Knight Dragon and Curse of Dragon you both attack Mindy directly too, Yardan commanded. A slew of breath attacks and a multitude of elements left the 4 dragons, and moments later, both girls were reduced to 0 life points at the same time. Jasmine LP 0, Yardan 4,000. Moments later, Yardan heard a ringing sound from his PDA and pulled it out while the 2 girls were in shock over their dual instant loss. He flicked it open and checked his profile, only to nearly drop it in shock when he saw the number of DP he had staring back at him. Name, Yardan Odhar Year, First Year Dorm, Slifer Red Day, 02 DP, 12,680. Holy fucking shit, he screamed internally. He had 230 DP left over after buying cards earlier. That meant he'd gained 12,450 from beating these today. What the actual fuck? That was over $1,000 worth. He made over $1,000 just for beating a pair of girls in a duel? What the actual fuck? Jesus Christ! What just happened? Jasmine asked, dumbfounded, looking at the boy who crushed them both effortlessly. Mindy patted her on the back sympathetically. After seeing the 3 boys off, Alexis turned to her 2 friends. She raised an eyebrow as she took in the despondent Jasmine, sitting on her knees, staring at the ground, wide-eyed in shock, and Mindy continuously patting her on the back. What happened? She asked. Yardan had just walked past her when they returned to shore and jumped into the boat with Jaden and Cyrus to take off back to the Slifer dorms. The only thing he'd done was smirk and wink at her as he went past. Oh, and checked her out as he went. He was subtle about it, but she was very used to being ogled, and it was easy for her to spot the way his eyes zeroed in on her chest. It could be irritating at times, but she didn't blame him. With how annoyingly big her breasts were, the tight uniform shirts she had to wear did nothing to hide them. Well, she could confirm he was interested in girls, at least she supposed. He destroyed us. Jasmine muttered. Mindy agreed, smiling at Alexis. We didn't even stand a chance. Heck, I didn't even get a turn. Looks like you were right, Lexi. Odhar is definitely a top-tier duelist. He'll hit Ra by the end of the week when the first promotion exams take place, and in a few months probably be promoted right up to Obelisk. Well now, wasn't that interesting? It had been a close match with Jaden, but she'd lost. Now she just needed to see how Yardan stacked up. Considering how Jaden had beaten her and would have beaten Chaz, it was no doubt that one of those 2 was the top duelist of the first years. The only other possible contestant for that title was Bastian Masawa. Did you record it like I asked? The blonde asked her black-haired friend. Mindy held up her dual disc and beamed at her, showing off a blinking camcorder hanging from the edge. "Yep, I think you'll get a kick out of it," Mindy replied. He was really something else right there. This academy really is much more interesting with them around. Alexis mused internally. For now, she'd have to wake up Jasmine, though, and get back to their dorm. She'd look into challenging Yardan Odhar another day. Chapter 4. "Now finish him off!" Yardan shouted, throwing his hand out pointing towards his opponent, who had an entirely empty field. "Ebony Blaze!" he commanded. Serpent Knight Dragon reared up its graceful head, black flames pooling in its mouth before throwing its head forward and unleashing a wave of black flames that washed over his opponent. Raizu Mototani fell to his knees, staring dumbly ahead. "How?" he muttered in disbelief as his life point 0 and the card holograms began to fade away. Yardan LP 3200 Yardan barely even paid his defeated opponent a glance, nor at the crowd forming around in the school courtyard to witness him yet again take on an Obelisk Blue. Instead, pulling out his PDA and looking at how much his DP increased, Raizu was perhaps one of the weakest obelisks he'd faced so far. The only one being worse was Taio on the first day. The only reason he'd managed to even take some of his life points was because of the spell card Ukazi that dealt 800 points of burn damage when used. Name: Yardan Odhar. Year: First year dorm, Slifer Red Day, 05 DP, 34,102. An increase around 2,000 or so, Yardan mused internally, a small smirk spreading across his face. Not bad. He stowed his PDA away and gave one last glance at Raizo before turning and making his way into the school, only pausing for a moment to wink at Jasmine, who was once again in the crowd of onlookers and paying close attention to his duels. She turned her nose up at him and looked away, but he didn't miss the light dusting of red across her cheeks, even from a distance. Mostly due to the fact that he'd fully adapted to Decoy Dragon's presence in his soul this morning and integrated with Lesser Dragon as Petite Dragon had advised a few days ago, but he'd pay close attention to a girl like her anyway. After that, he continued on his way into the academy. He wanted to stop by the card shop before class started. It was exam day today, and he had enough DP that he wanted to splurge a little. He was plenty confident in his winning the practical duel exam regardless, but a little extra insurance wouldn't hurt at all. Another easy win for that guy. Jasmine stayed in position, eyeing the doorway the Slifer boy had entered through. I don't get him. Ever since he'd crushed her and Mindy in one turn back on Monday night, she'd kept a close eye on the boy and watched every duel he'd taken part in since then. He'd had 8 duels now, including Raizu, since defeating her and her friend, all of them obelisks, and each one he won with ease. For the most part, she had noticed a few habits he had during dueling. He liked to use dragons mostly, and loved abusing the graveyard to special summon them instead of tributing. But that wasn't enough to beat him. One of the third-year obelisks had gotten angry yesterday with him acting so smug and taking on any obelisk that mouthed off, so he'd challenged Odhar and ran an anti-dragon deck, with Dragon Capture Jar and even one of the insanely rare Buster Blader cards. Only for Odhar to completely not use any dragon cards. He'd ended up destroying Buster Blader and winning a few turns later by somehow getting a field of defensive monsters, 2 Spirit of the Breeze, Soul Tiger, and Castle Gate. Then he'd switched them all to attack mode and used Shield and Sword to switch all their attack and defense points. Then equipped United We Stand to Castle Gate, ending up with a monster that had 5,600 attack points, one with 2,100, and a pair with 1,800. It was absurd. In another, he'd used Cost Down and Triangle Power to have monsters like Jerry Beanman of all things with nearly 4,000 attack points. Why does he bother me so much? Jasmine groused internally. She had no idea why. She'd been making excuses that she was getting a feel for his deck for Alexis to her friends, but really she just couldn't get him out of her head since that night. It wasn't as if he was the type she was attracted to. Sure, he had decent looks and was in pretty good shape, but he wasn't older and devilishly handsome, and he definitely wasn't rich. She'd looked into his student information and found out he was an orphan, an emancipated minor from Scotland of all things. So why couldn't she get him out of her head? The cocky confidence he had, The way he smirked and so boldly just went about his way, not letting anyone tell him what to do. He was pretty much the picture-perfect representation of someone with a devil-may-care attitude. And she couldn't keep the heat from her face with the little subtle flirting he flung her way, couldn't stop her heart hammering in her chest.
Ugh!
Jasmine let loose a muffled shout before shaking her head. I can't sit around here just thinking on that cocky slifer. The exams start soon. She made her way into the academy to head to class, but it was a pain trying to get Odhar out of her head. No way, no how. She was not going to let herself crush on that stupid kid. Monster reborn, not bad. Yardan grinned as he took a bite out of his weirdly curry-flavored sandwich and looked over the card he got from drawing sandwiches. Sadly, he hadn't managed to draw the golden egg witch. He'd only managed to do it on his first day and yesterday, getting his Seyaru on the first try, and yesterday obtaining Dragon's Mirror. Better luck next time. Sadie smiled and patted him on the shoulder. You've had some pretty good luck lately with your cards from the draws at least. That he did. He was so very glad to get the Dragon's Mirror, because coming up in a few days or so was his chance to get his hands on 5-headed dragon, and it would be the most optimal way for him to summon it. All week, besides going to classes and beating down Obelisk students, he'd begun preparing. Working out to get his body in good condition while going through all of his cards and creating as many combos with them as he could. Besides the cards he'd drawn from trying to get the egg witches and a pair of interesting cards called hack worms he'd bought yesterday for a mere 100 DP each because of their effect, he hadn't bought any card packs or anything at all. Say, Sadie, Yardan turned his attention to the pretty store clerk, gaining her attention. Do you have any Serpent Knight dragon cards for sale? He asked. Everyone had their iconic cards that made them stand out, and from what he'd researched, Rex Raptor had done away with his usage of the card and focused on the new Dino support instead. He needed a card that made him stand out as his ace, and he'd decided on Serpent Knight Dragon. He was the strongest spirit he had currently after all. And honestly, despite his pride, the Serpentine Dragon was a great help and dutifully followed any of Yardan's orders. Heck, for the past few days, Serpent Knight Dragon had been scouring the island looking for the dual spirit, dark magician girl, just because he asked about her. While all of his new spirits were great, the one he interacted with the most was Serpent Knight Dragon. Well, Serpent Knight Dragon and Petite Dragon. Yes, make sure not to forget about me now, just because I'm a weakling compared to him. Petite Dragon piped in sardonically. Yardan rolled his eyes. Don't whine, I used you to win 2 duels already, he replied. In one he'd fused him to create Darkfire Dragon and boosted him with fusion weapon, and in another he just won outright with the little dragon by equipping him with United We Stand and Tyrant Wing, then using 1000 energy. Yes, and I quite enjoyed that. But I'm just saying your go-to is to summon Serpent Knight Dragon. The small dragon rebuked. Yes, because it made it really easy to make people think he was just a dragon user like that, which made it easy to crush them when he threw them off with any of the many other cards he had. The face that one guy made when he got crushed by Jerry Bean Man was hilarious. We have a few, Sadie said, breaking him from his internal conversation with his bonded spirit. We keep them in the back because nobody is interested in them anymore, especially since the other support card is priced quite a bit higher than the monster itself. Oh, Yardan raised an eyebrow in interest. There was more support for Serpent Knight Dragon? Do you have 2 copies of Serpent Knight Dragon? He asked. Oh, and can I get a look at that support card? Sure, Sadie beamed. Give me a sec, hon, the brown-haired woman said and walked away, heading into the back room. She appeared a few moments later, blowing dust off of a little display case and setting it down beside the till. Walking over, Yardan checked it out and was interested to see at least 5 copies of Serpent Knight Dragon lined up in the little case, and in front of them a card he didn't recognize. It depicted art of Serpent Knight Dragon with its mouth open, black flames spiraling outwards in a black wave. The monsters were originally worth 4,000 apiece when we sold them actively, but I'll sell you them for 1,900 apiece if you buy more than one, Sadie said to him, then patted the display case. As for the Nightmare Sonic Blast, that used to go for 8,000, but I'll sell you it for 4,500 if you want it. Odd cuts in the prices, but as Yardan looked over the support card, he couldn't help but gape. All he needed was Serpent Knight Dragon on the field, and it had amazing effects depending on how many monsters he drew using its effect. If it was 1, he could add one of those cards to his hand. If it was 2, he could destroy any card his opponent controlled. If it was 3 or more, he could apply both effects. And on top of that, it let him order those cards in any order he desired. He couldn't stop the massive grin spreading across his face. "I'll take 'em both, the support card and 2 copies of Serpent Knight Dragon," Yardan told her. "And 2 packets of Rise of Destiny while we're at it. Big spender today, huh?" Sadie grinned as she began typing up his purchases on the till and adding up the total. "That'll be 7,800 DP, including the price for the Eggwitch attempt." Eesh, how expensive. Nearly £800 in UK currency. And that was with a massive discount. No wonder most didn't find Serpent Knight Dragon viable anymore. Only people that were loaded could get their hands on it and support cards for it, and multiple of them to make them viable would cost even more. Still, he dutifully let her take the DP from his account. While he'd managed to find out more about this life he'd taken's past, and the fact that he was apparently an emancipated minor on benefits and wanted to transfer the DP into his bank account, this was more of an investment for the future and making more DP and thus more money. Besides, he had an entire school year here to make more money before he had to leave the island for any period of time during the summer. His benefits may only pay 250 per month into his bank, but that was still over $1,000 he'd go back to from that alone, and he still had over $2,000 worth in DP, even after spending as much as he did here in the card shop. "Here you go, Han." Sadie grabbed his attention, sliding over 2 booster packs, and then reached into the display box to grab 2 copies of Serpent Knight Dragon and Nightmare Sonic Blast. Yardan took them ever so gratefully, his grin turning to shit-eating proportions. While placing the 3 cards in his deck box and beginning to open the packets, his eyes fell to Sadie's lower back as she walked back into the storage room with that display case, keenly checking out her lovely rear end. Honestly, it was too bad Sadie had the same name as his dead grandmother and brought up memories of her. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind chatting her up. "What are you doing up here?" Jasmine hissed in annoyance. Alexis looked up, thinking over the questions on the piece of paper in front of her, upon hearing her friend's voice, and looked over. She was surprised to find Yardan Odhar sliding into the empty seat beside Jasmine and taking a quick glance at the test sheet laid out on top of the desk in front of his seat. "No rule against it, sweetness," he taunted Jasmine with a daring smirk, "and I'd rather sit up here and enjoy the eye candy up here than down in the sausage fest with the rest of the Reds." Well, Alexis had to give him something. He was at the very least confident in himself and had no care for the glares being thrown his way by the many boys she could see from Obelisk spread about at the decks below and to the sides of them. It was like an unofficial rule at this point that they wouldn't try and pull ahead of each other by sitting beside the girls. Well, after they had nearly started fighting it out on the first day to sit near them. She didn't honestly get the desperation. Did boys really desire a good-looking girl that much? She knew how it all worked, and she didn't blame them really, but it could get annoying, and it was way over the top. She could hardly get a moment's peace from most of them. If she even talked to a boy, half the time the others who saw it would take it as a sign to pick a fight with said boy. The only boy the rest were too scared to pipe up against was Zayn. "Whatever," Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Just don't think you can cheat off of us," she warned. Yardan laughed at that, lifting up the test sheet. "You're kidding, right?" "A toddler could answer these," he replied. "I mean, are you kidding? A credit-based test for half of it, depending on the detail of your answers, and then simple multiple selection, with questions asking to describe the varied effects of field spells and how fusion works. This is kiddie stuff." Well, while Alexis didn't think it was all that hard-looking of a test, she was aware she was ranked second in her year academically, so it might seem easier to her than it was for others. She definitely didn't think it was kiddie stuff, as he claimed. An interesting claim nonetheless, though. If he was speaking the truth, and not just boasting to try and impress them, it meant he had much more advanced knowledge on dueling than she had thought. Jasmine huffed, crossing her arms under her breasts, and Alexis noted Yardan shot a quick glance at her friend's chest as she pushed up her substantial bust with the motion. His eyes quirked up as the redhead turned to look at him again, and his eyes met Alexis's own. He merely continued smirking and winked at her. He definitely wasn't shy about what he wanted, that was for sure. He didn't even care that Alexis caught him checking out her friend. Then again, he hadn't seemed to care when she caught him checking her out back on Monday night either. Seemed he had a liking for large breasts. Alexis honestly wasn't sure how to feel about his interest in her and her friends. It didn't take a genius to know what he really wanted. Most likely at the top of things was herself and her two friends in his bed with him. That desire didn't really detract all that much from her opinion of him. None at all, really. It was a natural, instinctual desire of a teenage boy. While he wasn't broadcasting it, he simply wasn't making a grand show of hiding it either, like he was being entirely true to who he was. That or she could be reading way too much into it. She tended to do that a lot. "We'll see when we get the results back, Odhar," Jasmine replied grumpily. "We'll see how smug you are later when you fail." Alexis didn't even have to have known Jasmine for as long as she had for her to feel how little she believed in that statement herself. Jasmine probably knew Odhar's abilities as a duelist better than anyone on the island at this point. She'd been keeping a close eye on every single duel he'd had so far. Jasmine was a bit too prideful to notice her own interest in the boy. It was kind of amusing that with how much she pestered Alexis herself about getting a boyfriend, she could barely tell when she herself was interested in one, or rather, tried to deny it with all her might. Yardan laughed. "You're so stubbornly cute, Jazz," he replied, leaning over to bump his hip against hers. "I can hear you, how little you believe in what you said through your voice alone. Honestly, it's quite flattering to know someone as gorgeous as you thinks so highly of me." Alexis had to try hard to contain her amusement as Jasmine's face flushed bright red and she immediately looked away from the boy so he couldn't see how hard his flattery hit her. "What do you think of the final question?" the blonde Obelisk queen asked to mask her amusement. "I almost forgot you were here with how quiet you were, Alexis," he teased as he turned to her. She raised her eyebrow at him, and he leaned back in his chair, boldly running his eyes up and down her body, lingering on her thighs that her skirt barely reached halfway down, and her breasts stretching out her uniform top. He was making a challenge of it, testing the waters and wanting to see her reaction. Well, she wasn't totally sure what game he was playing, but it wasn't like he was full out actively flirting with her. It seemed more of a game at this point. And she did like winning. She crossed her arms under her breasts, pushing the large mounds up almost obscenely. She could feel her nipples pressing tightly through her bra and wouldn't be surprised he could see them poking out through her top. "Well," she challenged right back, meeting his eyes and raising her other eyebrow at him. It wasn't like it was much of a bother for her to go about playing his game for a little bit. They were just breasts after all. His eyes dipped down a bit for a few long moments, eyeing her chest before sweeping back up to meet her, his smirk broadening. "It's an interesting idea, little throw-off question that challenges your knowledge on not just dueling but duel monsters in of itself," he replied. "Describe, in your own words, one of the greatest foundations of duel monsters. It's probably worth a pretty substantial amount of our grade, and depending on our answer, could net quite a bit of extra credit." Alexis nodded, taking in his answer. Seemed like he came to the same conclusion as her. It probably didn't really have a right answer either, just one that fit and let the testers know just how much you actually truly loved duel monsters. A loaded question, while simple at first thought, designed to pick out those truly passionate about the game itself, designed to highlight those truly invested in being a duelist. She noted Yardan was still staring into her eyes and felt a little competitive. She pressed her arms tighter under her breasts, pushing them up and out a bit more, before throwing him a wink and turning around to face her desk and test again. She didn't look to see his reaction, but considering he went silent for a few moments, she probably managed. Something at the least. What? She didn't know. Flirting wasn't really her forte. She had no interest in it. But as long as he didn't take things too far like the other guys that hounded her, she didn't mind playing the little subtle flirting game. It was an interesting little challenge, if nothing else. "So what took you so long to get to class, cutie?" Mindy asked him, leaning back in her own seat and speaking up for the first. She'd been silent, taking in their interactions with Odhar with a little grin on her face. Many made the mistake of dismissing Mindy as a simple ditz, and while she was a bit ditzy, she wasn't stupid, far from it. She was incredibly good with people and could get a good understanding of them from just a few simple conversations. "I hit up the card shop before class, spent nearly 8,000 DP on cards to enhance my deck," he replied after a moment. "I wasn't really worried about anyone I'd be taking on today to jump up to Ra, but there has been a few cards I wanted to get my hands on, and I even got a few ones I didn't expect that will be a massive help to my deck." Interesting, and to know. It seemed he wasn't being content even with his winning streak so far. And to spend so much on cards was something else. He just dropped the equivalent of what was nearly $1,000 or so in his home country. She could tell by the way Jasmine's eyes widened slightly in interest that he impressed her a bit. It was a bit impressive considering she, Alexis herself, didn't even have a total of 8,000 DP yet, and he talked about spending so much casually. Honestly, her friend's biggest fault as a person was that she was a bit of a gold digger. But Alexis didn't blame her for wanting to live a good life and wanting to make it easy to obtain by ensnaring a rich boyfriend. Who didn't want to live a good life after all? Still, the blonde wondered what he had added to his deck. Maybe some more dragon cards? Or possibly something related to the graveyard, according to Jasmine. He did love abusing the graveyard for easy special summoning. "Ooh, sounds exciting," Mindy gushed. "I'm glad I won't have to duel you today. I don't think I can take another one-turn kill like last time." "Sorry, I find it hard to go soft with girls like you," he teased her back. "Actually, hard is basically my default setting around you girls," he flirted. Mindy giggled at his words. "Ooh, how scandalous," she teased, while Jasmine huffed, doing her best to ignore the two, even if Alexis could see her ears quirking with interest in every word exchanged in her peripherals. Alexis had to give it to him again. Not many could basically outright tell 3 girls he spent any time he was around them with an erection, more or less, and make it amusing rather than outright creepy. Like, if Chaz told her he constantly had an erection around her, Alexis might just punch the slime ball. Any further flirting, though, between Yardan and her friends was cut to a close a moment later as the bell rang loudly and Dr. Banner made his way into the class. Alexis looked over the class and furrowed her brows. Where was Jaden? She couldn't see him in class. Don't tell her he was skipping such an important test. Chapter 5. As expected, he breezed through the exam and was honestly finished in less than half the allotted time given for the exam. There was a massive difference in his mindset in comparison to nearly everyone else around him. To them, it was a way of life, the same way back home he studied subjects like mathematics, geography, and such. For him, it was a hobby he spent years indulging in. It was like Pokemon in a way. How many people could pore over a textbook and internalize hundreds of names, what they were affiliated with, what they looked like, what they could do, their height, weight, and more? Not many, he wagered, and he definitely wouldn't have been able to. Whereas, because it was a hobby to him, it soaked into him over time through experiencing it, spending excess amount of time on it because he enjoyed it. And that was the fundamental difference between Yardan and everyone else around him, sans the likes of Jaden Yuki. But he wasn't ever going to bother trying to figure that guy out. Jaden was a Jaden, and he'd leave it at that. So he finished the test with over a half hour to spare, and he spent the rest of the class shooting the breeze and chatting internally with his spirits, and checking out the trio of voluptuous babes he was sitting beside. And they knew it too. Alexis didn't care at all, and Mindy was perfectly fine with it, even throwing him a few flirtatious winks. Jasmine, on the other hand, she spent half her time working on her test, the other half glaring at him. That girl needed to lighten up a bit. But then, as stupid as it was, the whole difference in social stature between the three dorms was deeply ingrained within the populace at this school. "You've got to give it to Kaiba." Yardan gave a rueful chuckle as he leaned back in his seat, balancing his feet on the edges of the desk. "He really doesn't do anything by halves." The guy literally created a new form of racism between red, yellow, and blue jackets. There should be an award for jackassery of that level. Yardan aspired to one day be that much of an autistic jackass himself. After all, it clearly worked for Seto Kaiba, and outside of losing to Yugi Moto and the cheating Pharaoh Adam, Kaiba was like the biggest fucking winner in the world. The dude was practically the richest man in the world, his name on everybody's lips, and the guy had even outright fucking hacked his way into the afterlife. Yeah, if he had to choose to be like someone, he'd choose Seto Kaiba over Yugi Moto any day of the week. Once class let out, Yardan found himself more or less alone in the classroom for a bit. The new cards had all come in today, and Duel Academy was one of the places the newest booster packs and cards would drop first, before most stores even. The vast majority of his class had made a stampeding beeline for the card shack. Yardan didn't bother. He'd already added some new cards to his neck this morning, some very awesome and powerful cards. Besides, he already knew nobody would be able to get their hands on any of the new booster packs, because Crawler was going to yoink them all before anyone else, and then give them all to Chaz Princeton so he could try and dunk on Jaden. Alexis, Jasmine, and Mindy didn't stick around long at all. Alexis was wanting to go prepare for her own practical duel exam, and the other two were eager for her help to make sure their decks were up to par. "You know, you could always ask me to help you out and free Alexis up some time." He couldn't help but grin and say to Jasmine as the three of them squeezed by him. She'd paused and hesitate for a moment before shaking her head. "I don't need the help of a slifer," had been her vehement denial. It was too cute and adorable to even find insulting or get annoyed by. Besides, as far as Yardan was concerned, give him Slifer over any of the other two god cards anytime. Slifer the Sky Dragon was just awesome. They all were really, but Slifer was by far his favorite. He'd been left with nothing to do until his own practical came up, so ended up bumming around until lunch was finished, and then finally made his way to the massive gymnasium that had been altered up with massive metallic walls to create tens of dozens of dueling fields. Thankfully, the Slifer Reds were the ones who generally got their tests done first, and the first years before anybody else. It was maybe only 15 minutes into the testing time that Yardan found himself being called out to duel. As soon as his name was called out, he found himself the center of attention. For the most part, all eyes on him. Reds, yellows, blues, you name it. He even caught sight of his three eye candies paying rapt attention as he made his way down and onto the dueling field. His opponent was a guy named Ren Kurosaki, a tall, thin fellow with dark black hair that had an almost green sheen to it. Honestly, it kind of reminded him of baby shit from eating all those soft tinned vegetable baby foods. "Damn it, I had to get Odhar of all people." Ren cursed from across the dueling field. Yeah, sucked to be him. Especially with how supped up Yardan's deck was now with Nightmare Sonic Blast, 2 more Serpent Knight Dragons, and Dragon Mirror. "Don't worry, I'll make it quick, mate." Yardan grinned over at him, drawing 6 cards after he won the coin toss to decide who was taking the first time. 4,000 LP. 4,000 LP. "All right, first things first," Yardan began after taking in his hand. He placed 1 card in one of the spell card zones. "I'll be starting with Pot of Greed to draw 2 more cards." A moment later, the grinning green jar flashed into existence in front of him with a swirling sound and golden light surrounding it. He drew 2 cards from his deck a second later. "Ukazi and Graceful Dice." "Huh? I can work with this," he smirked. "Next, I'll be summoning my dice jar in defense mode," he continued. In a flash of light, a large man-sized jar appeared in front of him, the grinning face of a deformed man hanging in the gaps, 2 huge dice balanced atop a long slimy tongue. Dice jar, rock light effect 200-300. "What the?" Ren stepped back at the sight of the monster before shaking his head and glaring at Yardan. "Are you not taking me seriously? What's with this crappy-ass weak monster?" Yardan rolled his eyes. Maybe if you didn't just look at attack points, you wouldn't be so scared to duel me, he replied. He felt no need to explain his strategy to this random stepping stone. From there, I'll place one card face down and end my turn. Ren just continued glaring as he drew a card and began his turn. I'm gonna make you regret this, you asshole, he threatened, before quickly slamming a card down on his disc. I summoned Kelbeck in attack mode. He shouted. A metallic fish-like monster appeared in front of him, all silver armor, with flared fin-like protrusions at the back, yellow in color and buzzing with electricity. Kelbeck, Fairy Earth Effect 1500, 1800. Next, Ren made to go on, but couldn't. I'll just jump in right here and activate the effect Dice Jar. Yardan cut him off. It's a quick effect, and see those two dice? They both roll, one for me, one for you. And whoever gets the lowest roll takes the opponent's number rolled multiplied by 500, though if say you roll a 6, I'll take 6,000 points of damage. Once upon a time, Dice Jar was a flip effect monster. But when Kaiba changed up the rules with Battle City, he done away with flip effect monsters more or less, by getting rid of the ability to play monsters in face-down defense position. So many monsters had the way their effects worked altered because of that. Dice Jar was one of those monsters, and its effect was hella useful if played right as a quick effect. Are you crazy? Ren stared at him in horror. Maybe. Yardan chuckled before pointing his hand at his monster and clicking his finger. Roll the dice. Yes, sir. Dice Jar gave a high-pitched giggle and replied, though only Yardan himself could hear it. Dice Jar spat out the two dice and they bounced into the ground before splitting apart. One rolled towards Yardan's side of the field, while the other rolled towards Ren. Seconds later they stopped. Yardan's landed on a 2, while Ren's landed on A4, winning the roll. Ren's eye slid up. Looks like luck isn't on your side, huh, Odar? He gave a full-bellied laugh as Dice Jar turned towards Yardan, its mouth open and an orb of dark energy swirling into existence within its maw. Oh no, there goes half my life points, Yardan droned, deadpan. Before smirking, do you really think I'd play a card like this without having a combo for it? I activate my trap card, Rainbow Life. The card he'd placed face down lifted up to reveal its face and the image of a fan with a barrier of prismatic light surrounding him. What this does is, for the cost of discarding one card in my hand, I can make it so that any damage I would take this turn, by battle or card effect, I instead gain as life points, Yardan explained, smirk stretching smugly as he deposited one of the cards in his hands to the graveyard. Carbonetin. Thanks, mate. A prismatic barrier of rainbow-colored light sprung up into existence around Yardan, just as Dice Jar fired a beam of dark energy. A beam of dark energy that was promptly swallowed up and disappeared from sight. 6,000 LP. That's some good life points, he taunted his opponent with a chuckle and stretching his arms out above his head. So what was that about luck not favoring me? Bro, what kind of pansy would rely on luck? Ren grit his teeth, his hands balling into fists. Oh, whatever. So you got a few life points, big deal. It doesn't protect your weak-ass monster, he snarled. Kelbeck, take it out with thunder. Ah, not so fast. Yardan cut him off. Again, Ren shouted angrily, a vein beginning to throb on his forehead. Bad news for you, mate. But yep, Yardan shrugged, placing another spell card in one of the spell zones. I'll be activating the quick spell, Revive Serpent Knight Dragon. New. A low groan left Ren, his rage draining out of him in all of a single moment as realization washed over him. Revive Serpent Knight Dragon was one of his favorite cards now, and one of his most common and favored plays. Yes, Yardan refuted. With this, I can tribute any monster on the field, mine or yours, and special summon from my hand, deck, or graveyard. Kelbeck exploded into shards of light, and dark flames rose from the ground, from which a very familiar, huge, beautiful, and noble purple-scaled serpentine dragon formed into existence. Oh, but I'm not done there, Yardan crossed his arms smugly. I'll be activating the effect of Carbundan in my graveyard, and by banishing it, I can special summon any level 7 or lower normal dragon monster from my hand or deck, and I choose another Serpent Knight dragon. Another wave of dark flame emerged from the ground, and a second gorgeous serpentine dragon was born from them. Serpent Knight Dragon, Dragon Dark, 23/5, 2400. Serpent Knight Dragon, Dragon Dark, 2352-400. Ren slumped to his knees, all fight leaving him as his shoulders went limp. End my turn, he sighed in defeat. Eesh, Yardan winced. His spirit looked so badly broken that, well, even Yardan himself almost felt some sympathy for him. Almost. Finish him off, boys. Yardan lifted his hand into the air and pointed at Ren after drawing a card. Twin Ebony Blaze. The two majestic serpentine dragons reared up, glittering black flames pooling in their mouths before thrusting their heads out and firing twin waves of dark flame that converged into a tsunami of darkness that washed over Ren. Yardan Odhar 6000 LP, Renesaki 0 LP. It's not all about attack points, mate, Yardan told him. In fact, most of my cards have pretty crappy attack points. It's all about how you make them work together. Like Dice Jar alone is bad card, but with Rainbow Life, it becomes a card that can outright win me a duel in a single turn, or raise my life points up to a maximum of 6,000. Ren sighed, but nodded. I guess so, he admitted. I'd never think to use a card like that in my deck. I'd have just seen the massive drawback from it and nothing else. He shook his head. You should work on that, Yardan mused, before chuckling. And don't feel too bad about losing to me like that. I've crushed plenty of obelisks over the past week that wouldn't have been able to do anything against this play either. A moment later, the voice of Chancellor Shepard rang out over the intercom system, reverberating throughout the huge gymnasium. He was announced the winner, and his promotion to Raw Yellow was added right after. I'm so not wearing the mustard jacket. Yardan thought to himself as he made his way out of the gymnasium after his duel. He much preferred the red jacket. Well, it should be fine to just wear it. Plenty of other people wear customized outfits, he mused, and in Chaz's case, the rich idiot would just flat out wear a black duster. As he made his way into the hall that left the gymnasium, he paused. Two people were standing in the middle of the hallway. One a familiar, tall and bodacious blonde, the other a tall, leanly built older boy with dark blue hair, a cold detached look on his face and a frown on his lips. Alexis and Zayn Trudale, the Kaiser himself. Yardan's interest was piqued now. Wonder what they want from me? He wondered. Well, he honestly didn't care all that much about Zayn, beyond how much DP he'd get for pushing his shit in through a duel, but he'd definitely make time for Alexis, waifu, my waifu, and all that crap. What's up, good looking? Yardan asked, directing his attention fully to Alexis as he placed his hands in his pockets, and ignored Zayn. Hey, Yardan? Alexis smiled at him. That was a pretty impressive duel out there. You controlled it from the very second it started. I'm just awesome like that. He smirked and gave a shrug. In all seriousness, his deck was pretty awesome, but he was still lacking some pretty vital counter traps he needed and some effect monsters as well, and even some spells. Right now, his best option in duels was to go full-on escalation, overwhelming train, and run right over any opponents before they could do anything. Seems so? The blonde raised an eyebrow before shrugging. As for what brings me down here, well, I did want to congratulate you, but it was this guy here that wanted me to introduce you to him. She jerked her head to the side and nodded at the tall, blue-haired boy. Well, was that so? And what does the big bad Kaiser himself want with me? Yardan turned his attention to the third-year student. A bit of a snort left the older boy's nose. Finally deigning to give me your attention, huh? He mused, before smirking. Alexis told me about you earlier, said you might interest me. So I checked your duel out alongside her when she asked, and then I decided to meet you. That's really all there is to it, kid. A who? Yardan's eyebrows rose up into his hairline. Good for you. Really, he wasn't sure how he was supposed to take or respond to any of this. Still, what a rude cunt. Maybe that's why Alexis thought he'd be interested in Yardan. So they both could be rude cunts together or something? I'm impressed, kid. The way you chain together your cards and all the combinations Alexis told me is something else. Especially considering where you picked up most of those cards. You really do know the difference between using a card and playing it. Zayn praised the younger boy. Wait, wasn't that the whole spiel he gave Cyrus in the anime? Yardan didn't get it then, and he still didn't get it now. Really, just a bunch of cryptic nonsense to sound cooler by the looks of it. I wonder if he thinks acting cool like that is good payment for stomping all over his little brother's self-esteem? He idly wondered. That said, Zayn continued, narrowing his eyes at Yardan, you duel like a complete thug. Your dueling style is all about overwhelming and crushing everyone in your way, just to earn money. Yardan blinked. And? He slowly asked. He wasn't seeing a bad thing to this. Zayn sighed disappointedly. You don't even see it, do you? He shook his head. Your monsters will never respect a duelist like you in the end. This style will fail you when they give up on you. Yardan gave a second, languid blink. So, do I not have your respect or something because of the way I'm using you guys? He asked internally. Because, instead of debating with some random guy who came up to him and started spouting crap like that, he could literally hear it right from the horse's mouth. Your dreams of philandering aside, the boy speaks nonsense, Hyozanryu scoffed. I do not even sense the ability to see or speak to us monster spirits within him. How would he ever know what we feel? Yeah, he thought so. Cool story, bro. Yardan rolled his eyes before turning to Alexis, who was trying and failing to smother a smile at the interaction going on between you two. So what was Jasmine's reaction? He asked the voluptuous blonde. Mostly reluctant acceptance. She already knew you were going to win, Alexis replied. I was impressed by the way, using a card like that, and making it so the only outcomes were you gaining loads of life points, or your opponent losing them. Honestly, that kind of stuff was everywhere back home before he got here. Anyone competent at duel monsters could come up with a combo like that. Are you not going to defend your honor? Zayn asked before Yardan could reply. He sighed and turned to the blue-haired third year. What do you want me to do, mate? He asked, honestly curious. Do you want me to get all angry because you don't like how I duel, then challenge you to a duel where we pit our ideologies against each other? All dramatic like? You said it, not me, Zayn smirked at him, crossing his arms. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing how you stack up against the best this academy has to offer after all the praise Alexis had for you. Really, Zayn? Alexis sighed. It's not fair to goad people into duels you know they can't win. He was going to tell him to buzz off. Playing against the cyber dragons when you hadn't finished your deck yet? That would be a pain. But hold the damn phone. What's in it for me? Yardan jutted his chin out challengingly at the older boy. Beyond the DP I'll get from booting you off of your little imaginary throne, pretty boy? Honestly, it would be much more fun just to punch his face in, see how much of a tough guy he was then. Then again, didn't this dude go full-on electric shock masochism later down the line and literally get high off of getting electrocuted to near death? Yardan? Alexis looked at him, confused, as if she couldn't believe someone at this school actually thought they could beat Zayn Trudale. Ever the greedy one, huh? Zayn shook his head. What do you want? Nothing from you, Yardan shrugged before grinning at the blonde girl across from him. How about a date with you if I win, Alexis? He challenged. It served two purposes. One, an actual date with Alexis. Two, didn't Zayn have a crush on her as well, like every other guy at this academy? I'm a petty fuck like that. His grin stretched as he saw Zayn frown. Is that all you think about? Alexis rolled her eyes before shrugging. Sure, why not? You're good, Yardan, really good. You're a top contender for the best first duelist, no doubt, but you can't beat Zayn. Nobody can, not even. She agreed and then trailed off, swallowing heavily. Not even your brother? Yardan finished for her internally. He felt bad for her. Maybe it was because she was probably his favorite character of the GX series. Or maybe it was just because she was so hot. But he decided he should probably do something for her in regards to Atticus. Maybe after the whole fiasco with the abandoned dorm, he could lay some groundwork with his meta-knowledge. And getting some brownie points with Alexis was not something he'd ever say no to. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Also check out other content on the channel. As mentioned before, the next part will be out on Thursday.